Before we dive in, take a moment and comment where you're watching from. Whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet corner of the world, let us know. This is simply about Earth, and what you're about to hear is not science fiction, it's science, colliding with something else entirely. Right now, as you listen to this, an object the size of a mountain is cutting silently through the void, heading straight for a world we've long believed was dead. Astronomers call it 3I Atlas. It's the third interstellar visitor in recorded history to enter our solar system, and while that alone might sound exotic, even exciting, what makes Atlas impossible to dismiss is how it breaks the rules. Comets follow gravity. They drift, tumble, and obey the physics etched into their icy cores since birth. But Atlas isn't. It's shifting course in ways that no natural comet should. It's venting gas from places no comet should. And it's not swinging by the solar system randomly. It's aimed with eerie precision at Mars. Yes, Mars. The planet that's held our hopes, our ambitions, our blueprints for a second home. For decades, it's been the dream of scientists, billionaires, and visionaries. But Atlas, this ancient interstellar anomaly, is arriving not as a visitor, but as a messenger, or maybe something more. Stay with me on this late-night exploration, because once you see the trajectory, once you trace the line it's drawing across space, you'll understand why astronomers have stopped dismissing it as coincidence. You think of objects from deep space as drifting, falling under the influence of stars, planets, gravitational tides. But Atlas corrects itself. Subtle adjustments, small velocity shifts, that scream of propulsion, not passive drift. At first, researchers blamed it on faulty instruments, then on observational error. But by the third course correction, the pattern was too clear, too clean. Natural comets don't steer. They spin, tumble, and vent unpredictably. But Atlas is navigating. And when an object navigates, intentionally coincidence vanishes. Atlas is on a long trajectory from Sagittarius, a galactic region dense with old stars and forgotten histories. And that alone is bizarre. Most comets near Earth hail from the Oort cloud, a frozen sphere surrounding our solar system like a shell. But not this one. Atlas has been traveling across interstellar space for thousands, maybe millions of years. And yet, it arrives now. It doesn't skim past Jupiter. It doesn't slingshot around the sun at random. It reaches its closest approach, its perihelion, at the exact time Mars is nearby. Not roughly, precisely. Imagine throwing a dart across continents and hitting the bullseye on a board you've never seen. That's what Atlas is doing. The odds? Functionally zero, if this is random, but it's not. And behind closed doors, scientists are admitting it. Something else happened. Atlas began venting gases, primarily carbon dioxide, while it was still 4.4 astronomical units from the sun. That far out, everything should be frozen solid. That's beyond the frost line. Sublimation shouldn't occur. Nothing should be waking up, but Atlas did. And the composition of that vented gas, carbon dioxide to water vapor, 8-to-1, not 2-to-1, not 3-to-1, 8, that's not how random chemistry works, but it is how terraforming engineering does. Because if you wanted to reshape Mars, to give it an atmosphere, to raise its temperature, you'd start with carbon dioxide. You'd want a thickening gas that traps heat. You'd want water vapor to seed clouds, to melt polar caps, to trigger the release of more CO2 locked in the soil. This isn't conspiracy. These are real equations published by NASA, studied for decades, and now in plain view of our telescopes, an object from beyond our system is delivering that exact chemical mix on a trajectory tuned to Mars. Coincidence? No. That word stopped being useful a long time ago. So ask yourself, what happens if all that material reaches the Martian sky? Even conservative models show rapid changes. Atmospheric pressure increases. Temperatures rise by tens of degrees. Polar ice begins to melt. Not over centuries but years, a world long thought sterile begins to stir, and it won't be because of us. It will be because of Atlas. So who sent it? Why now? Agencies publicly refer to Atlas as a comet, but leaked memos, budget reallocations, sudden shifts in Mars exploration timelines suggest otherwise. The people in power, they're preparing. They may not know what's coming, but they know enough to be afraid. And the timing is where this all goes from strange to unsettling. Because ancient records, thousands of years old, speak of sky gods from Sagittarius, celestial visitors, cycles of return tied to planetary alignments, and the reappearance of bright messengers in the sky. Cuneiform tablets, cracked and weathered, describe events eerily similar to what we're seeing now. A star-born object, releasing gases, changing a world. For decades we called those stories myth. But now the myths are aligning with data. The trajectory matches the legends. The gases match the models. And the moment of closest approach, October 29th, 2025. That date doesn't just work astronomically, it fits into ancient Mesopotamian calendars said to mark the return of the Anunnaki, beings not worshipped as gods, but described as engineers. And you don't have to believe the myth to feel the weight of the pattern. The timing is too perfect. The chemistry is too specific. The navigation too deliberate. Atlas may not be a comet at all. It might be the final phase of a project, older than history, unfolding right in front of us. The question everyone keeps whispering, if Atlas is behaving like a craft, if its path is this precise, then who is it for? Who plotted a trajectory across thousands, maybe millions of years, that arrives at Mars in 2025? Because to design a course like that isn't just clever, it's almost godlike. It means thinking on timescales that dwarf civilizations. It means launching something before Earth even had continents, and having it still hit its target now. That's not just engineering, that's foresight. When astronomers first plotted the path of Atlas, they expected the usual objects from interstellar space travel in straight, uncompromising lines. Gravity bends them, but nothing alters their basic course. The mathematics of celestial mechanics is ruthless, indifferent to intention or coincidence. A comet without propulsion cannot choose where it goes. It is like a stone thrown across a frozen pond, sliding until friction or collision stops it. Yet Atlas defies this metaphor. It has behaved as though the pond itself curved beneath it, reshaping its slide until the numbers on the screens no longer match the expectations written in textbooks. The first discrepancy was small enough to overlook. A faint deviation from projection, dismissed as observational error. Telescopes pick up noise, atmospheric distortions, mechanical limitations. Nobody sounded alarms. But then the second deviation appeared. Not large, not obvious, but precise. Its vector shifted in ways that could not be blamed on gravitational pulls alone. Solar radiation pressure might account for micrometer changes. Outgassing might explain minor nudges, if the comet was venting unevenly, but the data didn't fit those excuses. Instead, the object seemed to adjust as though correcting itself, almost like a spacecraft trimming its thrusters to stay aligned with a predetermined path. Natural comets do not correct themselves. They tumble, they spin, they outgas in chaotic bursts that push them off course, but never towards something specific. The statistics of probability make it clear. Random venting sends you astray. It doesn't send you neatly toward Mars. That is where the unease began. Because the further Atlas traveled, the more its deviations resembled deliberate navigation, the more its course looked less like the byproduct of random physics and more like the execution of a plan. Analysts fed the numbers into simulation software. They tested every variable. Gravity from nearby planets, solar wind, pressure from the faintest photons bouncing off its surface. None of them produced the trajectory Atlas was following. The only way to recreate it was to introduce tiny bursts of acceleration, like invisible engines firing. Each correction too clean to be mistaken for chaos, too consistent to be brushed aside as luck. Suddenly, the community faced a question it didn't want to ask out loud. What if Atlas was not drifting? What if it was driving? Imagine that for a moment. An object hundreds of meters across, ancient and silent, adjusting itself across interstellar distances with the kind of precision our best probes barely manage. Even our most advanced spacecraft, built with state-of-the-art propulsion systems and guided by teams of engineers, struggle with long-term accuracy. The idea that something not only makes those corrections but makes them while traveling from another star system is unsettling at best, catastrophic at worst, because it means we are not watching a comet, we are watching technology. Skeptics still argue for natural explanations. They point to outgassing patterns, the way frozen gases erupt into space when sunlight warms a comet's surface. But the problem is timing. Atlas began venting too far out, long before sunlight could explain it, and more importantly, those bursts occurred in ways that adjusted its course neatly, almost like thrusters aligned at perfect angles. Chaos disguised as order is possible, but order disguised as chaos, that's deliberate. This is where the conversation turns darker, because if Atlas is adjusting, then it has a destination, and if its destination happens to be Mars, the implications reach far beyond curiosity. An engineered comet means engineering intent. Someone or something designed this path. Someone calculated arrival windows, gravitational assists, and fuel expenditures not in months or years, but in millennia. To design a trajectory like this is to think on timescales that dwarf our civilizations. To execute it is to wield technology beyond anything we can build today. Tracing its path backward through space reveals an unsettling origin. The data suggests Atlas comes not from the Oort cloud, not from a nearby star system, but from the thick disk of our galaxy, a region filled with old stars, remnants of a formation era billions of years past. That means Atlas has been moving for an almost incomprehensible time, yet still manages to arrive now, precisely aligned with Mars's orbit, precisely timed with cycles noted in ancient records. This is not random. This is not luck. This is deliberate placement. Think about what that means. Before Earth had continents, before mammals existed, something may have launched Atlas across eons through voids so empty light itself takes years to cross. It traveled with patient accuracy until it entered our neighborhood. That kind of foresight suggests a program, a sequence, a project that has been unfolding since before humanity existed. It is not here for us specifically. It is here because Mars is ready, because the cycle demands it, because the timetable of whoever sent it dictates this moment. We just happen to be watching now, perhaps earlier than intended. Once you accept that possibility, a chilling set of scenarios emerges. The most benign is that Atlas is a terraforming seed, a delivery vehicle meant to alter Mars for future use. In this view, its trajectory exists to ensure a precise flyby at the right orbital distance for material release. A controlled dispersal of gases and dust injected at velocities perfect for capture by Mars's weak atmosphere. Too close and it crashes, too far and the gases disperse uselessly. Just right and it begins a transformation. And Atlas's navigation shows every sign of seeking just right. But the darker scenario is harder to shake. If Atlas navigates, it observes. If it observes, it may also assess. Mars might be the target. But Earth is watching. Our instruments, our telescopes, our rovers, all feeding back data to us and perhaps to it. The very act of monitoring may be part of the design, forcing us to see, forcing us to confront what we cannot control. Its trajectory might not only exist to reach Mars, it may exist to reach our awareness, to test how we respond when something impossible unfolds in front of us. Already, the impact on human society is brewing beneath the surface. Stock markets connected to space industries, Jitter. Classified budgets swell without explanation. Private corporations with interest in Mars settlements receive sudden surges of funding and new restrictions. Behind every polite press release calling Atlas an interesting interstellar comet lies a calculation about what happens if it proves otherwise. Because the moment humanity admits its trajectory is deliberate, the illusion of control evaporates. We become observers in someone else's program. And there's another detail worth noting, one that keeps resurfacing among those willing to run the numbers without fear of ridicule. Atlas's approach is not only aligned with Mars, its speed relative to the Sun is slower than expected for an interstellar object. Oumuamua moved so fast it could never be captured, destined to sail on forever, Borisov too, but Atlas's velocity is suspiciously tuned, almost as if it intended not to escape, but to linger. Objects from deep space should not slow down like this, unless of course they are built to. The unsettling truth is that humanity has no capacity to stop or even intercept something like this. Our fastest rockets would take years to catch it, and by then it will have already passed Mars and completed whatever mission it carries. We can only watch, only measure, only guess, and perhaps that is part of the design too, forcing a technologically adolescent species into the role of spectator, powerless to alter the trajectory, not just of the comet but of its own future. Some scientists, quietly, hesitantly, whisper about a possibility so vast, so deeply unsettling, that it reshapes how we think about the past, not just the future. Because what if Atlas isn't the first of its kind, not by a long shot? What if it's simply the one we finally noticed? The truth is, we may have been visited before. Not once, not twice, but again and again, each time blind to the signs. Comets we wrote off as anomalies, strange outgassing, unusual reflections, odd paths that didn't quite fit our models, but that we explained away. Because the alternative, it was too much. But now, with eyes sharper than ever, we're seeing things differently. Orbital analyses, deep scans, spectral data. Some researchers have gone back and reanalyzed every interstellar visitor we've catalogued. And what they've found are patterns. Small ones, but consistent. Things we missed the first time. Things that don't belong in the behavior of passive rocks drifting through space. Things like venting before solar exposure, stabilization that mimics active control, speed profiles that suggest not escape, but approach. And when you line them up, when you map their paths, the chill is immediate. Because it's not just that Atlas is arriving now, it's that it might be arriving last. The culmination, the final phase. And if that's true, then everything changes. What if Oumuamua and Borisov weren't just interesting, or weird, or worth a few papers in niche journals? What if they were probes, not active spacecraft, but passive carriers, scouts, the opening notes of a song that's been building for centuries, each one delivering something, minor compounds, fragments, seeds, calibration beacons, and then Atlas, larger, slower, richer in the exact ingredients needed to trigger a planetary transformation. The others laid the foundation, and now this one completes it. Mars may not be the next frontier we imagined. It might be the target. Because once you stop thinking of Atlas as a comet and start thinking of it as a delivery system, the picture becomes painfully clear. A timeline, a sequence, a program. Each object, part of a plan. Each visit, a step. Each flyby, a calculated move in a game that started long before we had language. And here's where the gravity of the situation deepens. Because the changes that Atlas could trigger on Mars, they're not distant, they're not speculative. They're near, immediate, physical, visible. If even a portion of its payload enters the thin Martian atmosphere, if even some of those gases cling to the sky, the chain reaction begins. Dust storms intensify but stabilize. Temperatures rise, not over centuries, but years. Pressure climbs, Ice melts, water flows, not as fleeting trickles in shaded craters, but as rivers, lakes, wetlands. And then comes life. Whether seeded or awakened, the reappearance of biology becomes inevitable. Microbes from deep beneath the surface, dormant for millions of years, finally feeling warmth and waking. Or genetic material carried by Atlas itself, encoded into microscopic shells, ready to bloom the moment the environment allows it. And that's when we realize we weren't the terraformers. We were the audience. Because if Mars blooms, if it turns green, if clouds gather and rain falls and soil breathes, it won't be our victory. It'll still be a return, a resumption of something ancient, something paused, now restarting. And the worst part, we might not even be in the script. Already, the decisions are splitting. Governments, agencies, corporations, they're all interpreting this event in different ways. Some argue we should accelerate, send missions, claim Mars before it's claimed by whoever set this in motion. Others urge restraint, isolation, treat it as occupied territory, not ours, not safe. But one thing is clear, nobody sits ignoring it. Because Atlas demands attention. It stuts not asking. It tests forcing, and that's the genius of it. If it's a probe, if it's a messenger, then part of its mission may be psychological. It might not just be altering Mars, it might be altering us. Because when a species sees something it can't explain, when the old rules break and the sky itself begins behaving with intention, it changes. We change, and change ripples outward. Already, you can feel it, can sit to you, in the headlines, in the tone of press conferences, in the increased funding for space defense initiatives that no one fully explains, in the sudden appearance of research grants for Mars climatology, in the murmurs between agencies who haven't shared data in decades now working behind closed doors. It's happening. Atlas is approaching, and behind its silence lies a signal louder than any radio transmission. It moves like a ghost, but leaves evidence like a scream. And we, the watchers, we are only just beginning to understand what it means. Because when it arrives, when it reaches that narrow point in space where its path and Mars align, something will happen. Something undeniable. And after that, well, that sits where the story really begins. When researchers first analyzed the gases venting from Atlas, they expected the usual water ice, maybe some carbon monoxide, a little dust, even trace organics. The typical recipe we've seen time and time again from comets as old as the solar system itself. But this time, something was wrong. Not just different, but wrong. Yes, carbon dioxide appeared. That wasn't the surprise. What shook them was the ratio. 8 parts carbon dioxide to 1 part water vapor, not fluctuating, not drifting, not impacted by rotation or solar exposure, just constant. Steady, too steady. The kind of steady you only get when something is engineered. Nature doesn't deliver precision like that. Cosmic chemistry is messy, temperamental. It varies from layer to layer, from spin to spin. But Atlas wasn't varying. It was venting a perfect mixture over and over, like a controlled burn, a programmed release. And when that data came in, those quiet gas scans from hundreds of millions of kilometers away, it triggered alarms behind the scenes. Because if you were going to terraform Mars, that's exactly the ratio you'd use. See, the Martian atmosphere is already made mostly of carbon dioxide, but it's too thin, too fragile, incapable of holding heat or supporting any form of sustained liquid water. The pressure is barely a whisper, temperatures murderously low. You couldn't survive there for more than a breath without a full life support system. So how would you change that? You wouldn't start with oxygen or nitrogen. You'd start with more CO4, a greenhouse gas, one that thickens the atmosphere, traps what little heat the planet receives, and starts a cascade. Then you'd add water vapor to seed clouds, humidity, and trigger the release of even more gases from the regolith. You warm the poles, they melt, they unlock ancient reserves, and suddenly, a dead world begins to breathe. NASA knows this. ESA knows this. They've run the simulations, drawn up the models, published the papers, and the mix, 8-1, CO-SU to ASU, exactly what Atlas is releasing. Not even close. Exact. So now, pause. Ask yourself the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What if that gas isn't a coincidence? What if it's the result of ancient planning, long-range engineering, a payload calculated to match the needs of a specific planet, Mars, and nothing else? That would mean Atlas was built, not formed. And if it was built, who built it? Because Atlas isn't venting at random. It began to release its material far too early, at a distance where solar heat simply doesn't penetrate. At 4.4 astronomical units from the Sun, carbon dioxide should be frozen solid, locked in ice, inert. But Atlas woke up, and the timing was perfect. Like something inside it had a clock. Not just a clock, but a purpose. And that purpose wasn't sit Earth. No, this mission, this movement, this unfolding blueprint, it's aimed at Mars. The timing, the trajectory, the chemical recipe, it all says one thing. Atlas is preparing the planet. Not for exploration, not for study, but for occupation. The kind no press release will mention, the kind no agency will admit, the kind that doesn't wait for permission or collaboration, the kind that arrives, makes the necessary adjustments, and leaves behind a world reshaped. And then it goes quiet again until the next phase. That's the part that unsettles the most. The silence, no signals, no beacons, no flashing lights or spinning dishes, just movement, corrections, calculated burns, and an object older than our species performing maneuvers we can barely model, let alone replicate. It's hard not to feel small. We've always believed we're at the edge of becoming an interplanetary civilization, stretching toward the stars, carving out our place. But what if we sit not pioneers? What if we store intruding? Because if Atlas is a tool, if it's following orders laid out before Earth ever cooled, then Mars was never ours to claim. We store not building a future. We stir awakening a past. And that thought, that simple, terrible realization, is what's beginning to haunt the scientists who understand what this all means. They circle watching the trajectory. They sit watching the venting. They sit watching Mars. And they know we are not ready. Not for what comes next. Atlas continues to fall inward, silent, steady, its invisible hand adjusting, recalibrating, aligning with a precision that defies randomness. Each new measurement from observatories across the world only deepens the sense of dread, not because the numbers are wrong, but because they're too right. Its position, its velocity, its corrections, every data point lands exactly where it shouldn't, if this were a natural object. And still, no signal, no obvious technology, no glow of engines, just the long glacial patience of something that seems to know exactly where it's going. And the closer it gets, the clearer its path becomes. Mars, always Mars, not a near miss, not a grazing pass, not an incidental flyby, a calculated brush, a rendezvous. This is why, behind closed doors, agencies are changing course. Budgets that once focused on lunar missions quietly pivot to Mars surveillance. Satellites retasked. Observatories extended. Even private corporations, ones with public dreams of colonizing the Red Planet, are suddenly bound by non-disclosure agreements. Something is happening. Something bigger than the press releases. Bigger than the headlines. Because everyone at the top knows what the public does not. This isn't just a comet. This isn't just an anomaly. This is a test of everything we assumed about the solar system, about our place in it, about our timeline. Because once Atlas passes Mars, if it releases even a fraction of its payload, the planet will not be the same, and the countdown has already started. You can almost feel it, can't you? In the air, in the tone of how experts speak now, a little more measured, a little less certain, a little more careful about what words they choose. You can see it in the way new data is released, piecemeal, delayed, sometimes quietly retracted, like something too heavy to reveal all at once, like they're trying to buy time, but for what? Because time is running out. And this is the moment where the old myths stop feeling like myths. Those cuneiform tablets, those stories about celestial messengers arriving from Sagittarius, they're not quaint anymore. They're not dusty legends filed away in obscure museums. They're starting to read like manuals, like warnings, like a history repeating itself across cycles far larger than human memory. Atlas's date of closest approach, October 29th, 2025, isn't just another point on an orbital chart. It's a keystone. It's the intersection of astronomy and anthropology, science and story. It's where numbers and myths overlap, and nobody can explain that overlap away anymore. Because look at the odds. Out of infinite paths, infinite timing, infinite chemistry, this object carries exactly what Mars would need, arrives exactly when our species is reaching for it, aligns exactly with ancient cycles written thousands of years ago. You could call one of those coincidences. Maybe two, but all of them? No. And here's the part no one wants to face. Atlas isn't moving fast enough to escape. Oumuamua zipped past too fast to catch. Borisov too. But Atlas, its speed relative to the Sun is tuned. It's as if it intends to linger, to be captured, or to execute a maneuver after its pass. Objects from deep space should not slow down like this, unless they're built to. That's why some scientists off the record speak about scenarios no one dares publish. They speak about delivery systems, about autonomous machines, about payload dispersal, so delicate it makes our best engineering look crude. They speak about Mars not as a future colony but as a project, one we've just stumbled into at the 11th hour. And if that's true, then our options are limited. Our fastest rockets wouldn't reach it in time. Our defenses are meaningless. Our technology isn't even in the same league. We are spectators watching the final act of a play that began before we existed. The question is, what happens after Atlas passes Mars? Does it slingshot away? Mission complete? Does it alter course again, heading for another target? Or does it linger in the inner system waiting? None of those outcomes fit natural comet behavior. All of them suggest a program still in motion. And all of them suggest the story of Atlas does not end with its closest approach. It begins there. Because the moment Mars changes, if it changes, the clock starts for us too. Policies will shift overnight. Space programs will accelerate or retreat. Corporations will either rush forward or shut down entire divisions. And ordinary people, the ones who believed Mars was the next frontier, will have to decide how to live in a solar system that may not be ours at all. And that sips the point. Atlas isn't set just approaching a planet. It's approaching us. The truth is, Atlas never needed to speak. Not in radio waves, not in binary code, not in the synthetic hums of science fiction. Its message is in its motion, its silence, its precision. The story it tells is written in vectors and velocities, in course corrections that defy probability, in chemistry that matches ancient blueprints for planetary rebirth. And we sat finally listening, because the data no longer fits inside the tidy boxes we once used to explain the cosmos. The equations are breaking, the assumptions are cracking, the trajectory of Atlas is rewriting everything. When something drifts, it leaves behind chaos. But when something navigates, it leaves behind intention. And the more we watch Atlas, the more it feels like it's watching us too. Maybe not actively, maybe not in the way we think of sentience, but its path, its actions. They're designed for witnesses, built to be seen, built to provoke a response, like a celestial test, like a slow-moving trigger that forces a young civilization to confront the truth that it is not alone, that it never was. Because nothing about this feels accidental. The gas ratios, the early venting, the synchronized arrival, it's all too exact, too layered, too rehearsed, like a symphony composed in another era, played now for an audience finally smart enough to understand what it means, or dumb enough to panic. And that's exactly what some governments are preparing for. They won't say it out loud, not yet, but their actions speak. The satellite realignments, the sudden dark funding of classified payloads bound for Mars orbit, the whispers of private missions being quietly delayed or fast-tracked depending on risk assessment algorithms we'll never see. There's a calculus happening right now, not of science, but of risk. Because the real fear isn't just that Atlas is delivering something to Mars. The fear is that it's delivering something for someone. As someone who may be watching the results, waiting for the environment to stabilize, for the atmosphere to hold, for the planet to bloom, and then return. Or worse, never left. What if Atlas is just the final piece? The trigger that awakens whatever lies dormant beneath the rust and silence of Mars. Not just microbes or frozen water, but machinery, infrastructure, signals that have waited millennia for the conditions to be right. And now, they almost are. We used to fantasize about discovering life on Mars, but what if life never left? What if it simply paused, protected by some ancient program that runs on cycles we can't even perceive? We've always assumed Mars is dead, that it's ours for the taking. But what if it isn't set? What if we're not landing on an empty rock, but entering an old room, one that's been sealed, waiting, prepped, and now reactivated? And suddenly, our rovers, our satellites, our probes, they all become intrusions, not instruments of discovery, but irritants, surveillance drones in a zone we don't understand, trespassers. And all the while, Atlas moves closer. Every correction, every adjustment is a drumbeat, a countdown, the culmination of a mission that's taken thousands of years to arrive at a single moment, a moment we thought would be ours, the triumphant step of a species expanding to another planet. But now, we thought not so sure. Now it feels like something else entirely. Because here's the part that keeps echoing across the scientific underground, the part no one dares publish. Atlas sets behavior mimics intent, and intent implies intelligence. Maybe not intelligence like ours, maybe not consciousness we can even define, but the kind that builds things, the kind that waits, the kind that waits, the kind that engineers across eons. And if something launched Atlas, then that something is still out there, watching, calculating, waiting for the results. And the results are coming fast. On October 29th, 2025. That's not just a date anymore. It's a pivot, a fracture point, a moment when Mars either remains what it is or becomes something else. And if it becomes something else, then we'll know. Not through a broadcast, not through a message, but through the sky changing, through the atmosphere thickening, through dust turning to clouds, and clouds to rain. And when that happens, it won't just be Mars that changes. It'll be us. We were never meant to see this, not yet. That's the feeling clawing at the back of every scientist's mind. Like we've looked behind a curtain that wasn't supposed to lift for another 100 years, 1,000, maybe longer. And now that we've seen it, now that we've run the numbers, followed the path, matched the chemistry, we can't unsee it. Atlas wasn't set designed for us. But we saw it anyway. And that may be the most dangerous part of all, because knowledge is not always an advantage, not when you're unprepared, not when you lack the context to understand what you're witnessing. We don't know if we've intercepted a message or just walked into the middle of a conversation that started before we existed. And if that's true, then our entire framework collapses. We've spent the last century telling ourselves that we're early in the story, that the universe is young, that intelligent life is rare, that if we find anything, it'll be microbial, fossilized, safe. But what if we're late? What if life came and left and is now returning? What if Mars was never meant to be empty? What if Atlas is just a restart button? And here's the part that keeps looping through the corridors of classified research centers, through the encrypted forums where the most brilliant minds talk behind digital curtains. It's not just what Atlas is doing, it's when it's doing it. Because Mars has reached a threshold. Right now, its orbit is nearing optimal solar exposure. Its axial tilt is just enough to favor longer seasons in the northern hemisphere, and recent internal measurements show geothermal activity where we thought there was none. All of it lines up. All of it says, now is the time. The planet is ready. And Atlas somehow knew that. It waited for this. And if that doesn't send shivers down your spine, it should, because it means that someone, somewhere, predicted all of this. Not just Mars's future, but ours. The evolution of our technology, the rise of our instruments, the expansion of our awareness, and still, they launched Atlas, not in secret, not in stealth, but in plain cosmic sight, on a path so long it makes our entire history look like a flicker. They knew we should see it. Eventually. And that means this isn't set to warning. It sets a test. Not of courage, not of ambition, but of awareness. Because now that we see Atlas, truly see it, we have a choice. Do we pretend it's a coincidence? Keep telling ourselves it's natural, harmless, just another strange comet in a sky full of strange things? Or do we face the truth? That Mars might not belong to us, that it might never have. Because when you strip away the denial, when you look past the press releases and the carefully worded statements, you see the real fear, not just in scientists, but in policymakers, in defense officials, in space agency directors who thought they were building the future, only to realize they were arriving late to a stage already set, and no one knows what role we're supposed to play. The actors have entered. The set is built. The cue has been given. And Atlas is center stage. We've watched it from afar, tracked its movements, measured its emissions, but we're not in control. We never were. And that, more than anything, is what rattles us. Because humans don't fear the unknown. Not really. What we fear is power without comprehension. And Atlas is incomprehensible. It moves like a ghost, but leaves footprints that bend physics. It behaves like a machine, but with the instincts of something alive. It answers no questions, but poses 1,000. And the closer it gets, the more it feels like a mirror. Not of what we are, but of what we said are not. And when October comes, when Mars glows just a little redder in the night sky, we still look up and wonder, was this ever our story at all? Or have we just been watching? There's something cruel about silence, especially this kind, not the silence of space which we expect, but the silence of certainty. Because by now, everyone watching Atlas closely understands what it means. And yet, nothing is being said. No public warning, no shift in global space policy, no coordinated international meeting to address what may be the most important object humanity has ever observed. Just silence. And that silence is deafening. It's the silence that says we don't know what to do. Because how do you prepare for something that defies every law you've spent centuries constructing? How do you react when the sky doesn't just behave strangely, but intelligently? Because make no mistake, Atlas isn't drifting anymore. It never was. Every adjustment, every plume of gas, every perfect alignment with Mars, it's all part of a pattern. And that pattern is a plan. Somewhere along the way, our understanding of comets broke. Not all at once, not in a single headline, but piece by piece, fracture by fracture, until the image we once had, the icy vagabond from deep space, was replaced by something else, something with intent. And that Seps when the real fear began, because we've always believed the solar system was ours to explore, a blank canvas, an untouched wilderness. But Atlas suggests otherwise. Atlas suggests we are not explorers, we are guests, temporary ones. And the hosts, they left messages like breadcrumbs through space, waiting for the right time to activate. And now, the time has come. Because every element of Atlas's design, if you can call it that, points to purpose. From its entry angle to its deceleration profile, from its venting schedule to its targeting of Mars's orbit, it's too refined, too rehearsed. And worst of all, it's on time. Not early, not late, on time, as if answering a call. And the question that rises, unspoken but ever present, is this: are we watching the beginning of something? Or the return? Because the idea that Atlas is a seed, a terraformer, is already terrifying enough. But what if it's more than that? What if it's also a signal, a marker, a flare to whatever or whoever sent it? What if it's the cosmic equivalent of a beacon activating the next stage? And if so, what comes after? Another object? A vessel? An arrival? Because Mars transforming is one thing, but Mars awakening? That's another entirely. And if you think this is speculation, just remember, everything about Atlas that once sounded like fantasy has already proven real. The gas ratios, the maneuvering, the perfect orbital match with Mars, the timeline. So now, when you ask what comes next, you're not just asking hypotheticals. You should asking what SIP's already in motion, what SEP's already been launched, what might already be here. Because some think Atlas isn't set the first phase. They think it sits the final. That Umuwayamua, Borisov, other unnamed, unrecognized objects that passed us by, those were the setup, the tests, the calibration. And Atlas is the catalyst, the switch, the moment. And that moment is racing toward us, faster than our probes can catch, faster than our understanding can adapt. Because the truth is, this was never about Atlas alone. This was always about Mars, and what it sets about to become. Mars was never lifeless, not truly. That's the thought gnawing at the edge of this story now. Because the more we examine what's coming, the more we look at the ancient terrain, the fossilized riverbeds, the magnetic anomalies, the more we begin to wonder, was it ever really dead? Or just dormant? Because Atlas doesn't just arrive at random. It arrives precisely when the planet is most likely to respond. Not just with surface changes, but with awakening. It's not speculation anymore. The models are running constantly now behind locked lab doors on supercomputers that were supposed to map Earth's climate. But they're not modeling Earth anymore. They're modeling Mars with Atlas. And what they show is not gradual. It's not cautious. It's SEP's rapid. Dump Atlas's Cove water cocktail into the atmosphere, even a fraction of it, and within months the pressure starts to climb. Clouds form, surface temperature jumps, ice caps begin to shrink, not over centuries of human labor, but in years. And under that ice, beneath the dust, could be reservoirs of gas, of water, of life, just waiting. And here SEP's the thing. Mars might not need us at all. That SEP's the hardest part to swallow. We've always framed the red planet as a challenge, something to conquer, to engineer, to shape in our image. But what if it's already shaped? What if the process doesn't require us? What if we were never in the plan? That would explain the timing. That would explain the silence. And that would explain why, despite all the international attention, there is no mission being sent to intercept Atlas. Because the truth is, we can't intercept it. Not in time, not with the propulsion tech we have. Atlas is already too far ahead. We're stuck in observation mode, stuck in a front row seat to something we don't understand, something we were never invited to. And what happens when Mars begins to shift, visibly? When the sky starts to haze, when satellite images show storm patterns that didn't exist a month before, when polar ice vanishes faster than it should, what then? What will humanity say? Will we still call it coincidence? Will we claim credit? Or will we finally admit that someone got there first? And this leads us to the most disturbing part of all. If Atlas is part of a plan, then the rest of the plan must exist. It sits out there, somewhere, in deep space, beyond our reach, maybe already moving, maybe already watching. And we stir not ready for that. We're not ready for a second object, or a response, or an activation of something already on Mars. Because some theories go further than even the bravest scientists will admit in daylight. They suggest Atlas is not a terraformer, but a key. That Mars has systems beneath its surface, dormant mechanisms, waiting for a trigger. And that trigger might be chemical, thermal, magnetic, or coded. Coded into the composition of Atlas, a signal not meant for us, but for what's buried under the Martian regolith. Devices, vaults, memories, instructions, and all it takes is one match, one contact, one moment when Atlas's engineered payload meets the waiting locks of a world long forgotten. And when that happens, everything changes. Mars will not just warm, it will react. And humanity, watching helplessly from across the void, will be left with one final question. Was it always watching us back? By now, the public story and the private truth have diverged so far that even insiders struggle to keep them straight. Officially, Atlas is still a comet, an interstellar curiosity, a valuable scientific opportunity. Unofficially, behind sealed doors, and officially, behind sealed doors, in meetings where no phones are allowed, it's called something else entirely. They call it the catalyst. And that word isn't set chosen lightly. Because a catalyst doesn't just act alone. It triggers, it transforms. It speeds up reactions that would otherwise take ages. And that's exactly what the models show Atlas doing to Mars. Not creating life from nothing. Not introducing something alien out of nowhere, but accelerating what's already there, waiting. The deeper scientists look at Mars, the stranger it becomes. Buried hydrogen signatures, magnetic remnants of an ancient dynamo, traces of methane plumes that rise and vanish seasonally, as though something below the surface breathes. All these clues were treated as curiosities for years, little puzzles for planetary science. But now, through the lens of Atlas, they look like pieces of a machine. And Atlas may be the switch. That's why the leaks started. Whispers from observatories, anonymous documents, grainy screenshots of classified models showing Mars's climate flipping within a decade. If Atlas releases even part of its mass, people who can't stay quiet anymore because they understand what's at stake. And yet, governments stay silent. They don't scramble rockets. They don't announce emergency intercept missions. They issue calm statements, repeat the same old comet script, and wait. Because there sits nothing else they can do. Atlas is too far ahead, too fast for us to catch, too big for us to move. Our fastest intercept designs would arrive years too late. We are spectators, observers, witnesses to a plan that is not ours. And that sits the hardest truth to accept. For a species built on conquest and expansion, on the illusion of control, to realize it's not the architect but the audience. It's devastating. It's humbling. It's terrifying. And yet, there's a strange inevitability to it all, like a story we were always going to stumble into, like a plotline we've only just realized we're part of. Because if you go back far enough, to the earliest myths, the first stories humans etched into stone, you find echoes of this moment. Bright wanderers from the sky, red worlds reborn, visitors from Sagittarius, messengers that arrive not with words but with acts, terraformers disguised as stars, warnings disguised as comets. We called them gods. We called them omens. We built temples to them, and then we forgot. But the cycle didn't set. The cycle kept going. And now, on the edge of a new millennium of spaceflight, the pattern reappears, not in smoke and prophecy, but in data and spectroscopy, in orbital calculations, in gas ratios, in images captured by spacecraft orbiting a small, cold world about to become something else entirely. We are not being told. We are being shown. And the showing is almost complete. Because October 29th, 2025 is not far away anymore. It's not a distant point on a graph. It's not an academic prediction. It's a date you can circle on a calendar, a date you can feel approaching like a vibration underfoot. And when that day comes, Mars will either be the same planet it's been for eons, or it won't hit. And if it isn't, then we'll know, beyond all doubt, that Atlas was never a comet. It was a signal, a key, a promise, or a warning. And the silence we've been living in will finally break. Time stretches now, taut and humming. Every telescope that tracks Atlas, every spectrometer that measures its venting, every team methodically adjusting models, they're all working inside a growing pressure cooker. Because when you see an object move with intent, when you measure chemistry that matches planetary blueprints, when you trace the path and realize it aligns with myth and science at once, you can't unsee what you've seen, and those who see it quietly tremble. Behind the public face, press releases about interesting anomalies and further study needed, there's a darker conversation happening, one that doesn't make it into mainstream journals, one that circulates through late-night conference room whispers, hidden communiques between observatories, secure slideshows on air-gapped computers. They're asking the hard questions, the ones with no safe answers. Because if Atlas is deliberate, a crafted object with a mission, then every assumption about our place in the solar system may need rewriting. We might no longer be the central actors in humanity's cosmic drama. We may be the latecomers stepping onto a stage already set. And that possibility shifts the entire narrative of space exploration, colonization, and cosmic purpose. Let's go deeper. Atlas doesn't just approach Mars. It sinks. It calibrates. Its trajectory contorts just enough to ensure that the moment of closest approach isn't random. It's an intersection, a convergence. And that convergence carries a payload, not just of gases, not just of engineered chemistry, but of narrative, of expectation, of an altered world. Some scientists refer to that payload as the seeding, the idea that Atlas carries not just transformation agents, coal-tar water vapor, but catalysts, molecular triggers, microbial liners, genetic instructions encoded like messages. The possibility that whatever awakens on Mars isn't purely autochthonous, but seeded, designed to grow. And if that's true, then Mars isn't just terraformed, it's resurrected. The term terraforming itself begins to feel too crude, too Earth-centric. What if the engineers behind Atlas didn't want to make Mars like Earth? What if they wanted to make Mars like theirs? A world in their image, consistent with their chemistry, their biology, their logic. The idea twists the mind, because it suggests a legacy, not an invasion, but a restoration, a homecoming. Imagine a planet, long thought dead, suddenly becoming alive, not over centuries, not over decades, but in years, in months. Satellite images would show clouds forming, atmospheric haze rising, dust storms that organize themselves, surface frost disappearing, oxygen levels inching upward because chemistry inside the soil releases new compounds. And when those signals appear, when scientists see them, they won't believe their instruments at first. They'll cross-check, they'll question calibration, they'll look for natural causes, until the only explanation left is the engineered. Already, in labs behind closed doors, astrophysicists are computing those shifts, predicting how much mass Atlas must deposit to push atmospheric pressure by even 10%, modeling how quickly temperature would climb at the equator, calculating how quickly polar ice caps would retreat. All of it shows nonlinear leaps. Once a threshold is passed, feedback loops begin. CO feed trapped beneath the ground releases. Water locked in permafrost sublimes. Ice melts, rain maybe, in sheltered craters, and then microbial life, if present, awakens. Some researchers go further. They propose that Mars hosts dormant biomes, organisms engineered eons ago to lie in stasis until conditions changed. Life not just left behind, but waiting for light, warmth, pressure, for gas, for a signal. And Atlas, the theory goes, is that signal, not just a delivery but an activation. No one publishes this, not yet, but the idea echoes in the darkest corners of space science. It makes senior scientists lose sleep. It ignites moral debates. If someone else's biology awakens on Mars, can we claim it? If Mars becomes habitable because of an artifact not of Earth, does it belong to us or to the designers? What rights do we have? What rights do they have? Are we the colonists or intruders? Yet we're powerless to stop it. Our rockets can't reach Atlas in time. Our deflector strategies are laughably underpowered. We can't intercept, capture, divert, or detonate. At best, we watch. At worst, we arrive too late. And that fact of reactive impotence feeds desperation. Even as Atlas draws closer, agencies begin preparing contingency plans, classified Mars missions on standby, emergency orbiters, shielding experiments, atmospheric sensors ready to activate the instant something changes, legal documents drafted in secrecy, sovereignty claims, planetary protection treaties revised, interplanetary insurance clauses, but none of it publicly acknowledged. Meanwhile, fear spreads outward. Among scientists, yes, but also among private space companies, among national space agencies, among policymakers. Some call for immediate manned mission acceleration to reach Mars before Atlas's effects manifest and claim its legacy. Others plead restraint. Don't touch the planet until we understand. Some demand transparency. Some demand silence. Many simply demand control. But control is an illusion, because the moment Atlas transforms Mars, if it does, the new baseline shifts. We'll be dealing with a changed planet. A living one with atmospheric pressure, clouds, perhaps rain, a planet transmuted while we watched. And then we'd have to reckon with what comes next. Exploration would no longer be passive. It would be arrival into another world already alive, already possibly inhabited. The moral stakes would multiply. The legal, ethical, biological territory would become uncharted. And so, the silence continues. The masquerade of comet passes. Keep watching, remains the public narrative. The shadow of secrecy grows longer, but inside, among those who see Atlas for what it likely is, dread is pervasive. In those rooms, scientists compare Atlas to myth, not as metaphor, but as precedent. Because across human history we've told stories of sky visitors, of world bringers, of gods who came from the stars to seed planets. And now something like that might be happening again. But this time the visitors left not stories, but substances. Not legends, but molecules. Not myths, but planetary change. It's tempting to ask if this is happening. Why not communicate? Why not send a message back? But anticipation of that question is baked into the design. The silence isn't failure, it's intention, because if communication comes too early, it changes the result. It invites interference. It demands diplomacy. It forces negotiation. And for whatever designers laid Atlas's path, maybe they never intended negotiation. Maybe they intended sovereignty. Maybe they intended reclamation. Maybe they meant this moment to be uncontested, but it won't dare be, because we already see the signs. The moment the atmospheric metrics shift, global media will erupt. The moment water appears, humanity will demand access. The moment life signals, every moral thread will unravel. The moment Mars is no longer Mars as we knew it, it will belong to whoever controls that transformation, and will be scrambling to define ownership in between worlds. Now let me pause for a moment, because I want to ground this in the human level. You and I watching, listening, asking how this narrative touches us, because this is not just cosmic theatre, it's our reckoning, because Earth, for all its vitality, is also fragile. We think about terraforming Mars, about colonizing red deserts, but what if we lose track that Earth too is vulnerable? What if we focus on other planets while our own becomes less livable? What if this story teaches us not just about Mars, but about what it means to steward life, to respect cosmic architects, to understand our place when we're not the first? Because if Atlas is real, then we're being called to respond, to prepare, to watch, but also to decide. Do we approach Mars as conquerors, as caretakers, as collaborators? Do we speak into the silence? Do we hope to negotiate? Do we build safeguards? Do we brace ourselves for the possibility that we are late to the game? All those questions swirl now, and we have to hold them even as Atlas hurtles inward. Because in those last months, those final weeks, actions, even small ones, may matter. Even signals we send may matter. Even which probes we launch. Even what messages we beam. Even what data we release or withhold. Meanwhile, catalogues of ancient myth continue to haunt scientists. Tablets from Sumer, Babylon, Egypt recount sky serpents, stars that come to Earth, messengers descending from constellations, alignments with Sagittarius, stories of return, of worlds born from cosmic seed. Once, scholars dismissed them as poetic metaphor. Now, swept by the data, some quietly reconsider. What if human myth remembered something real? What if our ancestors glimpsed the same sequence? What if the memory of that visitation lay hidden, encoded in stories waiting to reawaken? Those parallels don't prove anything, but the fact that myth and modern data converge, that wants explanation. And when you have an engineered object approaching Mars precisely on a timeline noted by ancient records, when you see gas ratios matching old terraforming models, when you sense a narrative edge, you stop assuming randomness is enough. You begin to suspect that stories may be tools, maps drawn by those who came before, foreshadowing paths human thought would one day measure scientifically. That's the weight on scientists now. The fear that they're not just measuring space, but reenacting myth, that they're not just watching a comet, but witnessing a sorcery of engineering across eons, that they're not just participating in the future, but stepping into an ancient cycle repeating itself. And as the days inch forward, October inching closer, every sunrise, every nightfall feels heavier, the sky seems sharper, the stars feel louder, the distance to Mars feels electric. Because one wrong calculation could misrepresent data, one delay in release could spook nations, one misinterpreted gas plume could become a diplomatic crisis. One sensor misalignment could imply life where there is none, or miss it entirely when it appears. Everything matters now. The momentum isn't just physical, it's psychological. The entire scientific community is braced. The global space community is waiting. The world is on the cusp of witnessing not just a celestial event, but a transformation. And if Mars changes, so do we. Because the arrival of Atlas isn't just about gas or gravity or trajectory, it's about agency, about authorship, about whether we are minor actors or collaborators. And in these final months of waiting, we all become participants. Because silence is no longer possible. For decades we imagined Mars as a blank slate, a canvas for humanity's next great chapter, a quiet red world waiting for our arrival. It was dust and wind and memory. But that illusion is beginning to crack. Because Atlas, whether we want to admit it or not, is forcing us to re-examine everything, not just the future, but the past. And what a past it might be. As Atlas draws near, the data we collect grows richer, but so does the sense of unease. Every adjustment it makes, every precise shift in trajectory, adds weight to a theory too large for mainstream science, yet too supported by evidence to be dismissed. Mars may not be waiting to be colonized. It may be waiting to awaken. That single idea is reshaping late-night discussions in labs across the globe. Imagine this: Mars, not dead but paused, in hibernation, its systems buried, its functions slumbering beneath rust and rock, and centuries of silence. Atlas may be the alarm clock. Because, let's ask the question head-on now, what if Atlas isn't just delivering gases? What if it's delivering permission? What if Mars is protected? There are myths, hundreds of them, across civilizations that never touched. Stories of forbidden lands in the sky. Worlds where gods walked, where life was planted, and then removed. Worlds cursed or preserved. Stories where only a chosen signal, a preordained return, could reawaken the engines hidden beneath the soil. And the more we analyze Mars, the stranger it becomes. Subsurface anomalies, magnetic echoes, grid-like patterns in crustal density that don't fit with natural geology, all once dismissed as coincidence or the tricks of our instruments. But when Atlas lines up its path to pass directly over these zones, again and again, the coincidences begin to feel like coordination. And suddenly, the silence on Mars doesn't feel natural. It feels deliberate. Every mission we've sent there, the orbiters, the landers, the rovers, has returned data. But not once have we truly pierced the surface. We drill centimeters, we scrape, we touch, but we've never dug deep, never sent missions with the power to excavate kilometers down. Why? Because maybe something doesn't want us to. Maybe the system resets if we try too hard. Maybe the only way in is through the key, Atlas. Let's consider another possibility, one being discussed in the most secure rooms imaginable. What if the gas Atlas carries is not just meant to reshape Mars, but to interface with it? What if buried technology, long inert, requires atmospheric triggers? What if its sensors are dormant, not broken? And what if those sensors are calibrated not to detect noise, but to wait for a signature that Atlas has carried across time? And that changes everything. Because then we're not talking about terraforming, we're talking about activation. Mars, under that lens, becomes less a planet and more a device. Or worse, a vault. A storage world sealed until the proper key arrived. And if that's true, the gas is not atmosphere, it's access. A chemical password. And what lies within, what might be waiting for that signal, we have no way of knowing. The speculation is wide-ranging. It could be biological, a biosphere waiting to resume, ancient species, engineered flora, spore fields that drift dormant in the sand. It could be technological, machines, networks, systems built to operate only when the sky carries the right mix of gas. Or it could be something else entirely, memory, stored consciousness. A world with no surface cities because its inhabitants lived below, cities under regolith, vaults beneath ancient lava tubes, entire civilizations sleeping inside computational chambers, suspended until the air returns, until the heat rises, until Atlas arrives. And once that system wakes, how will it perceive us? As threats? As intruders? As children? Or as fragments of its own past, left behind returning? Because here's the most haunting question of all. What if we are part of that same legacy? What if Earth and Mars are not distinct stories, but broken halves of one? There are legends, old, fragmented, obscure, of a war in the heavens, of a planet broken, of refugees falling to Earth, of humans seeded from above. Most scientists rightly dismiss these stories. There's no proof, no records, no archaeology that links Mars and Earth. But what if the archaeology hasn't been revealed, because it hasn't been triggered? What if Atlas is that trigger? And if it is, then Earth's origin story changes. We become the forgotten branch, the echo, the children of a world sealed and now opening. Some researchers have proposed that if Mars was once inhabited and Earth seeded later, then Atlas may be here not to transform Mars, but to call us, to draw us home, to show us what we sit forgotten. The unsettling part is that the timeline supports it. Mars's magnetic field collapsed billions of years ago, stripping its atmosphere, ending its water cycle. That collapse would have driven any surviving intelligence underground. It would have demanded a failsafe, a contingency, a way to reset the surface when the time was right. And that's exactly what Atlas appears designed to do. No radio waves, no visible propulsion, just motion, chemistry, trajectory, all pieces of a silent operation with a singular goal: restore Mars. The implication is staggering, because if you can build a planet-wide fail-safe and launch its trigger across interstellar space and time it to return when your world is ready again, then your intelligence is not just vast, it's patient. And patience is power. Atlas has no urgency. It doesn't need to hurry. It moves at a pace dictated not by us, but by its own logic. A logic old enough to wait thousands of years. A logic calm enough to drift, knowing that when the alignment comes, it will be in place. That kind of logic terrifies us, because humans don't set wait. Well, we rush. We conquer. We fear the unknown and try to control it. But Atlas cannot be controlled. And Mars cannot be claimed. Not yet. Not while something older is unfolding. There are meetings happening now, secret ones, between the heads of space agencies, between military liaisons, between scientists who once competed, now collaborating, not to plan missions, but to draft protocols. What happens if Mars wakes up? Who has jurisdiction? What kind of contact scenarios are acceptable? What weapons are authorized? What quarantine systems exist? The answers are bleak, because we stir not ready, not technologically, not ethically, not psychologically. If Mars transforms in front of us, if it becomes more than rock and dust, then we'll be forced into the role we've always feared, spectators. And maybe that sips the lesson. Maybe Atlas is not just a catalyst, or a courier, or a signal. Maybe it sits a mirror, held up to us, showing what we could become, what we once were, or what we failed to be. And now, the moment approaches. October looms. Mars hangs steady in the sky, and Atlas draws closer still. We've crossed the line now, the threshold between speculation and inevitability. What was once theory is becoming fact. What was once fringe is now under formal review. Every shift in Atlas's movement, every plume of gas, every subtle change in Mars's upper atmosphere is being logged in real time. The silence isn't empty anymore. It's tense, heavy, pregnant with meaning, because something is happening and everyone knows it. The atmosphere around Mars has started to change. It's faint, barely measurable, but it's there. Carbon dioxide levels are increasing. Not just because of solar interaction, not just seasonal dust shifts. There's a signature, a profile, a fingerprint in the gas that matches what Atlas has been venting for months. And that gas is accumulating. The models predicted this. Quietly, secretly, in simulation rooms kept off network. Not because the science is uncertain, but because the implications are too vast for public release. If the atmosphere continues to thicken, if pressure begins to rise, then Mars is no longer a dead world. It becomes something else. And when that happens, we will no longer be able to lie to ourselves. This was never a comet. This was always an operation. A silent, ancient operation now executing its final instructions. And those instructions are simple. Restore, reclaim, restart. But restore what? Reclaim for whom? Restart why? We have no answers. We only have the process, the eerie symmetry, the unnatural precision, and the speed so slow on a human scale, so perfectly tuned to planetary time. Atlas doesn't move with urgency, it moves with inevitability. And the effects are compounding. Martian surface temperatures have ticked up slightly, not enough to boil water, but enough to shift frost, enough to alter ice patterns, and something else, methane, traces, faint, but repeating, a cycle, a breath, as if something beneath the surface is responding. Scientists are cautious. Methane can come from geology, but the timing, the alignment, the chemical context, all of it says otherwise. Because the last time we saw methane plumes on Mars, they vanished quickly. No pattern, no rhythm, but now they pulse, they return, they rise with the heat, as if waiting, as if watching, and then there sips the light. High-resolution images from Mars orbit have captured something new, bright flashes, reflections, glints of something not dust, not ice, but angular, sharp. Some claim it's just imaging error, others aren't so sure. Some suggest structures, others suggest doors. Doors. That word hangs like fog over the minds of those who've seen the data, because if there are doors, then something was sealed. If something was sealed, then something was meant to open. And if Atlas is the key, then the countdown is nearly over. Some researchers now refer to it as the resonance event, the moment Mars reaches a tipping point. Not one we control, but one we detect. It's not an explosion, not an invasion, not a transmission. It's simpler, more profound. It's when the environment aligns with the system that's been waiting, like a lock meeting the correct code. Click. And suddenly, sensors we didn't know existed might activate. Machines we've never seen may begin to stir. Systems built long before us may blink back into life. That sips the fear and the awe. Because we didn't build it. We didn't plan it. But we set her here to see it. And once it begins, there's no turning it off. No abort, no override. Because the one thing humans are terrible at admitting is this. We're not in charge. Not out here. Not anymore. You see it in the shift in tone from major space agencies. They're careful now, guarded. Words like anomalous, unexpected, inconclusive fill their reports. Not because they don't know what's happening, but because they do, and they can't say it. Not until they sit you're forced to, and that forcing moment is close. Because the signs aren't abstract anymore. They're visible. They're on the screens. They're lining up. And soon they'll be undeniable. And then what? Do we declare Mars a preserved world, off limits? Do we rush to land, claim territory before it's too late? Do we contact? Do we wait? Or do we do what we always do when faced with the unknown? React too late. There are voices calling for preparation, ethical frameworks, communication protocols, new treaties, but they're drowned out by the inertia of fear, of disbelief, of denial, because belief is the final threshold. and most aren't sit ready to cross it. But belief is coming, because belief doesn't sit require faith, it requires evidence. And the evidence is rising from the dust. With every hour, every update from orbit, the data hardens, and the message becomes louder. Not in words, but in change. The strangest thing about Atlas is that it never needed to say anything. No beacons, no coded pulses, no transmissions, just silence and movement. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any broadcast. And we begun to understand it. Atlas isn't here to talk, it's here to act. Its course corrections are sentences. Its gas plumes are paragraphs. Its timing is punctuation. And Mars is the page. For decades, we told ourselves we'd be the authors of Mars's story. We'd write the first line. We'd lay the first bricks. But Atlas's arrival rewrites that narrative. We are not the authors. We're the readers, the witnesses, perhaps the footnotes. And as that realization sinks in, our world feels smaller. This is no longer a scientific curiosity. It's a psychological event. It's the breaking of a worldview we've carried since the Enlightenment, that the cosmos is indifferent, that planets are empty until we fill them, that intelligence is rare and scattered, that we, if we're careful, can be first. Atlas is the end of that illusion, because everything about it screams design. The trajectory, the deceleration, the chemical payload, not rough or approximate, but exact, too exact, and not once has it wavered. Not once has it drifted off the numbers our hidden simulations predicted. It is following a program older than our species, and it's right on schedule. That schedule is now accelerating. Not physically, but politically, emotionally, scientifically. You can feel it in meetings where no one dares name what they're thinking, in papers rewritten to hide the conclusion, in the careful pauses of officials at press conferences. We're all holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it will. Because the data from Mars is already changing, not in a headline-grabbing way, but in the fine print, a fractionally thicker atmosphere, temperature spikes measured in tenths of a degree, methane signatures pulsing in rhythm with Atlas's approach, ice patterns shifting around the poles, all faint, all deniable, all real. And it sits building, like a slow drum beat, like a countdown, like a heart. Because that's what it feels like now. Mars isn't just a rock, it's a body, and Atlas is reviving it. You see the pattern in old myths, don't you? The sleeping world, the returning star, the breath of life falling from the sky. They weren't metaphors, they were memories. Memories of a cycle so vast our history forgot it. But our stories remembered, and now, in the age of satellites and telescopes, we're watching the cycle repeat, stripped of poetry, stripped of ritual, revealed as engineering. This is why the scientists who know the most look haunted now. They're not just afraid of what Atlas is, they're afraid of what it implies. Because if Atlas is the trigger, then something else built it, something else planned it, something else may be waiting for its result. And what happens when Mars's atmosphere thickens enough to hold not just heat but sound? When the winds shift, when dust becomes clouds, when clouds become storms, when storms become rain, when craters collect water, when sensors detect chemical signatures that don't belong to geology, when finally life reappears. We've never faced that scenario before. We've fantasized about discovering life. We've fantasized about creating life, but never about life that returns without us, life that rises because of a plan we didn't make, life that answers not to us but to a clock set long ago. And this is why the question, what do we do, keeps echoing through the halls of power. Do we accelerate? Send humans now? Plant a flag before the transformation finishes? Or hold back? Treat Mars as a preserved site, an archaeological wonder, a sacred space? No one knows. And no one wants to decide. Because whatever we choose may define our species forever. If we go too soon, we might interfere with a process we don't understand. We might be intruders. We might be contaminants. We might wake something we're not prepared to meet. But if we wait too long, we may lose our chance. Mars may become a world already occupied. And Atlas keeps moving, indifferent to our debates. Every gas release, every micro-correction is another page turned in a book we didn't write. It is relentless, unstoppable, patient. And in that patience, there sips a lesson. Because Atlas doesn't hurry. It doesn't panic. It doesn't hesitate. It just continues. Following its path across millions of kilometers, following a program older than our species, following instructions written into its bones, if it has bones, by minds we cannot yet imagine. And as October draws nearer, the weight grows heavier, the numbers harden, the models sharpen, the picture becomes clear. Mars is about to change. And when it does, so will we. Because in that moment when the sky over the red planet thickens and swirls and breathes, we will understand something we suspected but never proved. We are not first. We are not alone. We are not the authors. We are witnesses. By now, the orbits of our satellites around Mars are filled with more than cameras and spectrometers. They're filled with dread. Every machine we've launched, every robotic scout watching from above, they're no longer passive tools. They're eyes, witnesses, unblinking observers to a transformation we were never meant to control, only to see. Atlas looms in every transmission now. Even when we're not looking at it, it's there, behind the numbers, behind the slight drift in temperature readings, behind the clouds forming where clouds shouldn't exist, behind the pressure building 1 micron at a time. We keep trying to isolate variables, blame solar cycles, geological emissions, dust storms, but the pattern refuses to break. Atlas is the common denominator. Atlas is the constant, and when constants emerge in data, they tell you where the truth lives. And the truth is, something is awakening. Slowly, deliberately, like a sleeper turning in bed before opening their eyes. Not just a planet, not just an atmosphere, but something else, something deeper. There are signals, not broadcasts, not radio, but fluctuations in background fields, oscillations that weren't there before, interference patterns in our deep radar sweeps, flickers in gravitational echo returns, almost like pulses, like something beneath the surface is reacting to the environment, reacting to Atlas. This is where the hypotheses begin to fracture. Some think it's purely biological, that Atlas's gases are reactivating microbial colonies that have been locked in permafrost for millions of years. Others think it's structural, that buried machines are calibrated to respond to precise atmospheric inputs. But the third theory, the one whispered in the darkest corners, is the hardest to face. The idea that Mars is not just a host, but a container. That something was sealed, something built to wait. And what if Atlas isn't set just bringing air? What if it's set bringing instructions? Or worse, permission? Because as the data sharpens, the timing becomes harder to ignore. Atlas will pass closest to Mars during a precise moment, when the planet's tilt favors warmth in the northern hemisphere, when seasonal shifts align with the maximum solar exposure, when atmospheric circulation is most likely to distribute gases globally. Not accidental, not coincidental, but aligned. Aligned like an ancient ritual, like a planetary reboot sequence written in climate. It sounds too perfect. And yet, there are still no signals, no voices, no greetings. Nothing spoken, but silence by now is its own kind of message. Because when something could speak and chooses not to, that choice is communication. And maybe we are not supposed to hear anything. Maybe we are just supposed to watch. Because sometimes the message isn't the voice, it's the change. And change is happening. Already. Martian dust storms are shifting patterns, jet stream anomalies, atmospheric wave formations, seismic noise increasing, trace gas sensors detecting complex organics, just at the edge of certainty, enough to tantalize, enough to terrify. And we sit still a month away. This is no longer a planetary science issue. This is no longer about rocks and ice and ancient riverbeds. This is existential. Because if Mars becomes habitable again, not through human effort, but through alien engineering, then Earth is no longer the center of anything. It sits just one node in a network we never saw. And we still have to ask ourselves the question that SIP's been building quietly since Atlas was first spotted. What if the solar system is already claimed? We've always assumed space was empty until we filled it. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe what we see as void is actually stage. Maybe what we called silence was intermission. And now the play resumes. Because the moment Mars crosses its threshold, when the air holds, when the heat settles, when the surface shifts from passive to responsive, everything changes. Our maps change. Our philosophies change. Our ownership collapses. And our history fractures. Because suddenly, the red planet isn't red anymore. It sups alive. Not in a human way, not in a way we can relate to, but alive in the way a system becomes active. A program that finally boots up, a vault that finally opens. And we will have to decide fast how to respond. Because once the activation completes, there may not be time left for diplomacy. There may not be time left for debate. There may only be reaction. And Atlas will already be gone. Job finished. Mission complete. Slipping back into the black without a word. They're calling it the quiet bloom now, a phrase passed from analyst to analyst, spreading through whispered reports and encrypted communiques. Because what's happening on Mars isn't loud. There are no flashes in the sky, no thunderous eruptions, no dramatic visuals for public consumption. But beneath the silence, something is blooming. And the center of it all is Atlas. Still no signal. Still no language. Still no acknowledgement of us. And yet, everything is responding to it. The CO Hubble's emissions have intensified, matching precisely the models built years ago to simulate Martian atmospheric restoration. The gas isn't just dispersing randomly, it's settling, layering, holding, and that's not supposed to happen. Not on a world this cold, not without help. But help has arrived. And it's doing its work with the calm confidence of a process practiced before. Because that's what this feels like now. Not an experiment, not a test, but a cycle. A return. A system rebooting not for the first time, but the next time. The implications run deep. The planet's surface temperature continues to rise, fractionally, yes, but consistently. A fraction here, a tenth of a degree there, and suddenly, the math shifts. Permafrost melts, subsurface ice pockets fracture, water vapor joins the air, and with it, other things. Things that move. Things that breathe. We are beginning to detect new spectral signatures. Not alien creatures. Nothing that would satisfy science fiction, but chemistry. Complex organics. Chains that suggest replication. Proteins. Carbon compounds. Molecules that hint at memory. Not ours. Theirs. Because if this is a restoration event, then what's being restored may not be primitive. It may not be wild. It may be guided. This is what terrifies the biologists. Not just the possibility of life, but the possibility of designed life. Life that obeys rules we don't know. Life that doesn't just react to its environment, but follows purpose, follows code, follows instructions left buried in soil older than our species. And still, Atlas says nothing. No message. No contact. Because this is not a conversation. It sits a trigger. And it sits already been pulled. You see the tension now in global agencies. The scramble. Space programs once divided are suddenly in quiet coordination. Intelligence communities are involved. Defense departments. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows. Mars is changing. And we didn't change it. And that is power. It reshapes everything. Every philosophy of science. Every projection of colonization. Every economic model of interplanetary expansion. Because if a planet can be restored without us, we become irrelevant. And if Mars has owners, then we are trespassers. This is why some now call for withdrawal, to stop, to wait, to monitor and do nothing more. But others argue, if we don't move now, we'll be locked out forever, that we must land before the process completes, that we must make ourselves part of the story, even if we're uninvited. The debates rage behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Mars continues to warm. New colorations appear across the polar rims. Ice that had not moved in centuries is gone. Geyser-like outbursts, once rare, have become patterned. Some say rhythmic, and deep sensors detect changes in crustal density, not from quakes, but from heat. As if something inside is waking up. Machines? Organisms? Both? We don't know. But we do know this. The planet is responding to Atlas in a way it has never responded to us. We drilled. We scraped. We sampled. But nothing happened. Then Atlas arrives, and within weeks the world begins to shift. This realization sits like lead in the hearts of mission control teams. All their triumphs, Pathfinder, Curiosity, Perseverance, suddenly feel like toys. Unwelcome fingers brushing against a machine they didn't understand. Now the machine is stirring, and all we can do is watch, because the moment of closest approach is near. October 29th. 1 month, 30 days until Atlas makes its pass. 30 days until the final gas burst. 30 days until Mars crosses the threshold. And there sits no stopping it. Because it sits not just about physics anymore. It sets about momentum. Narrative momentum. Cosmic momentum. We have entered a story that began long before Earth's continents formed, and that story is reaching its next chapter. Some say we should send a message now, not to Atlas, but to Mars, to the planet itself, as if, in its awakening, it might hear us, understand us, recognize us. Others say that would be arrogant. We don't even know who or what we stir speaking to, but the need to say something is growing, because silence, true silence, is no longer possible. Not with the atmosphere thickening, not with the methane pulsing, not with the surface shifting. Something is rising, not toward us, but up from beneath the crust, up through the dust, like a memory that never died, only waited. And we are the audience, watching a world reborn. It's hard to overstate what this feels like now, like standing at the edge of something ancient, something sacred, and realizing too late that you've crossed a line. The air isn't different, but it feels heavier. Screens aren't flickering, but they feel warmer. Time hasn't slowed, but every second stretches because we know what's coming. We just don't know what it means. Because we've entered the countdown phase, not just of Atlas's pass, but of something far larger, something written not in mission clocks or launch windows, but in patterns, in planetary behavior, in silence. And that silence is deepening. Atlas is still on track. Every thruster puff, every venting event, every orbital correction, perfect, no deviation, no anomalies, no hesitation, as if it's been here before, as if it knows the path by memory, not by calculation. And maybe it does. Because something, somewhere, wrote this moment. Not just in software, but in nature. Every movement matches with shocking precision the ancient myths we once called nonsense. not in form, but in sequence. The arrival of the star that reawakens the red world, the moment when the air returns, when the sky thickens, when the sleepers stir. And now, the sleepers may be stirring. Seismic sensors around Mars's equator have picked up something new, not random, not tectonic, rhythmic, a low, repeating pulse, measured, consistent, like the thrum of a massive machine rebooting, or the breath of something huge, finally inhaling. It doesn't match any known geological process. No Marsquakes, no subsurface water flow, no thermal fracturing. It's too even, too deliberate, a beat, not a break. And here sits the part no one wants to say out loud. We don't know how long its steps been doing this, because until now we weren't listening for it. Until Atlas came close, we weren't watching for patterns this specific, this alien. So we ask, what is it responding to? The heat, the pressure, the change in air, or the signal embedded in the gas itself? Because it's becoming clearer that Atlas doesn't just carry material, it carries instruction. The mix of gases, the ratio, the dispersal timing, the spatial alignment over the Martian crust. It's not just about warming the air, it's about unlocking something, like a password, typed not with letters, but with molecules. And when that password is fully entered, what happens next? Theories abound. Vaults, machines, genetic libraries, climate controls, biomes trapped in hibernation, subsurface cities, or something simpler, a call. Because here sits the chilling hypothesis circulating in the deepest classified briefings. Atlas isn't set the end of the process. It sets the beginning, the invitation. Once Mars is ready, once it passes the threshold, we may not be the only ones watching. Something may answer. Not a return trip, not another comet, but a presence. Something that's already out there, waiting for confirmation. The green light, the signal that Mars is ready again. And then they come. We've seen the pattern before. A signal sent, then silence, then response. It's the same logic behind every ancient probe we've launched ourselves. We scout, we wait, and when conditions match, we follow. So what if Atlas is the scout? What if we are about to receive? And what will they see when they arrive? A planet warmed, an atmosphere forming, signs of memory restored, calmed us, small, scattered, stunned us, still asking questions they answered eons ago. That's what keeps scientists up at night. Not that Atlas is alien, but that it's part of a sequence we don't belong to. That we were never meant to be here when this happened. That we stumbled into someone else. SIP's return. And now we can leave. We start watching. We filming. We start analyzing every molecule. And that may be the trigger. Because some systems don't just react to environment, they react to observation, to attention, to consciousness. And that raises a terrifying possibility. What if Atlas didn't just bring chemistry? What if it brought recognition? What if we were invisible until now? And what if Mars, once awakened, doesn't just breathe, but remembers? It's strange how quickly reality can tilt. One day Mars is just a rust-red rock in the sky. The next, it's a stage, a system, a device, waking under our eyes. All of our language about it feels suddenly small. Dust storm, permafrost, seasonal methane. Those words belong to the Mars of yesterday. The Mars of tomorrow is something else. And at the heart of that shift, still silent, still moving with impossible precision, is Atlas. No transmissions, no explanation, just a constant unfolding of intent. Every gas plume another line of code, every course correction another keystroke. Mars itself the console, We're watching a program execute in real time and we don't even know the outcome, but we start beginning to see the shape of it. The atmosphere thickens, fraction by fraction, molecule by molecule, and the feedback loops begin. Warmth creates sublimation. Sublimation releases more gas traps more heat. Ice melts, water vapor rises, and suddenly the climate models no longer look like simulations. They look like prophecy. A world once frozen begins to stir, not in centuries, in seasons. And then there are the pulses, that low, steady beat under the Martian crust. Seismic instruments on orbiters pick it up now with every pass. Not random, not chaotic. Regular, deliberate, like the slow heartbeat of something vast. Each pulse coinciding with Atlas's gas release schedule. Each pulse traveling through the crust at frequencies no natural quake produces. Each pulse timed to the planet's rotation as if locked to a clock. It seems impossible, but it seeps there. And as those pulses rise, so do the anomalies. Temperature spikes along old lava tubes. Magnetism flickering in arcs across regions thought dead, faint glints under the ice caps. Too angular to be rock, too steady to be light noise. The kind of shapes our eyes want to call structures, but our minds aren't ready to accept. Structures under a sky that is changing. Some in the classified rooms call it the reinstatement. Others call it Phase 2. But no matter the label, the idea is the same. Atlas is not just terraforming, it's unlocking. It's triggering a system dormant for eons. Not just biology, but architecture. Not just atmosphere, but memory. Memory in stone. Memory in machines. Memory in genomes buried beneath regolith. And if that's true, then Mars isn't just a planet. It sits a vault. A vault we've been orbiting for decades without the key. And now, the key has arrived. What we don't know, what keeps every agency director awake, is what comes out when the lock turns. Is it a world ready for life? Is it a system that begins producing its own atmosphere? Is it an echo of a civilization long gone? Or is it a signal sent outward to something waiting to return? Because the timing is too exact. The gas ratio too precise. The pulses too regular. The changes too fast. This is not an experiment. This is an execution of design, and design implies a designer. Where are they? Are they gone? Long dead? Leaving only this automated rebirth? Are they watching from far away, waiting for their world to breathe again? Or are they nearer than we think, hidden in deep time, hidden in deep space, patient beyond comprehension? Atlas gives no hint. It simply moves. It simply vents. It simply writes its code into the Martian sky. And humanity simply watches. The debates behind closed doors grow sharper now. Should we send a crewed mission before the process completes? Plant a flag? Claim some moral foothold? Should we withdraw entirely? Treat Mars as a protected world? Should we try to intercept Atlas even now, knowing it's impossible? Should we send a message, a plea, a warning? Every option carries risk. Every option feels small. Because for all our rockets, our AI, our global networks, we are still a young species, and Atlas is ancient. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't explain. It doesn't stud blink. It just executes. Line after line of molecular code written across the sky of a world that is no longer what we thought it was. A world that may never have been what we thought it was. A world that may now be waking into something that remembers itself. And us. We stir not colonists anymore. We set witnesses. And maybe we flirt trespassers. Because once the atmosphere thickens enough to hold sound, once the pulses rise into a rhythm we can hear, once the surface begins to respond in ways our instruments can't deny, the question will shift. It will no longer be what is Atlas. It will be what is Mars. And after that, what are we? Because in that moment, when a planet awakens under alien code, we'll have to face not just the possibility of life elsewhere, but the possibility that our whole story has been part of someone else's cycle. And that realization is heavier than silence. It sits heavier than fear. It's the weight of history, folding back on itself. And October is coming. Every day now, new numbers arrive from Mars orbit. Pressure up another fraction, trace organics in places they shouldn't be. Temperature spikes at dawn, dust devils forming where the air was once too thin to hold them. Each measurement small on its own, but together they tell a story. The story of a planet shifting, the story of a world waking, and the pulse beneath the crust continues. Not a quake, not random, a heartbeat. Always coinciding with Atlas's latest release of gas, always traveling through the ground like a ripple, always steady, deliberate, insistent. It's like listening to an engine turning over in a machine that's been dormant for ages. And above it all, Atlas glides. Silent, steady, a mountain of ice and engineered compounds moving with the grace of a predator. Still no message, still no light. Still no signal, just the relentless execution of a program written eons ago. The public doesn't know, not really. They see the sanitized charts. They hear the polite phrases, unique opportunity, unprecedented science, continued observation. But behind closed doors the language has changed. No one says comet anymore. They say asset. They say mechanism. They say phase. And the debates have reached a fever pitch. Do we act? Do we wait? Do we risk landing before the process finishes? Or do we stand back and let it unfold? Some argue we're already too late. Some argue we were never meant to be part of this at all. Because what if Mars is not just a planet being changed, but a planet being reclaimed? Atlas's gas mixture is exact. Its timing perfect. Its path aligned to the planet's rotational cycles, seasons, and solar exposure. This isn't terraforming in the way we imagine it. It's more like a ritual, a recipe, a password typed into the sky. And when the password finishes, what unlocks? This is the nightmare scenario whispered by those who've seen the full data. Not invasion, not attack, not even life as we know it. Something older, stranger, systems that lie under the regolith like a dormant city, genetic libraries waiting to be released, machines that breathe and grow and reshape the surface. We don't know, we can't know, we're not in control. Because for all our probes, our landers, our drones, nothing we've sent ever triggered this. Nothing we've done ever woke Mars. But Atlas arrives, and the world stirs. That's why the word witness keeps surfacing now in private reports. We are witnesses. We're not writing history. We're standing in it as it unfolds. We're watching the return of something so old our myths only hint at it. Something that plays out over timescales no human empire could survive. Something that may never have been meant for our eyes. And yet, here we are, watching the polar caps shrink, watching the dust shift, watching clouds form over canyons that have been dry for millions of years, watching the color of the planet change at the edges of the visible spectrum. The scientists who've compared ancient records to modern data talk about cycles, cycles of climate, cycles of return, cycles of presence. They point to constellations, to alignments, to patterns etched into stone thousands of years ago, once dismissed as stories, now lining up with orbital mechanics. It seeps too much to call coincidence, too neat to call chance. And still Atlas does not speak. It does not blink. It does not deviate. It simply writes its code into Mars, line by line, molecule by molecule. And in the control rooms, the countdown clocks tick. October 29th. Closest approach, the day the final burst of gas is expected, the day the models show the tipping point may be reached, the day the red veil may fall, and Mars steps out of its long sleep. What happens then? Will we see clouds thick enough to cast shadows? Will methane surge into the sky? Will the heartbeat under the crust grow louder? Will the first signs of life, any life, appear on satellite imagery? Or will something far stranger occur, something we don't even have language for yet? We don't know, but the certainty is this: Atlas is no comet, Mars is no blank slate, and we are no longer just explorers. We are the audience to a return we can stop, and the curtain is about to rise. The light over Mars is different now. Not brighter, not dimmer, just different. A subtle shift in hue, noticed first by atmospheric modelers, then by AI-assisted imaging tools. A chemical change in the way light scatters through the dust, like the planet is being slowly repainted from the inside out. And the numbers confirm it. Spectral lines that once pointed to a dead world now flutter with motion. Gas ratios fluctuate daily. CO fights where there should be stability. Methane bursts when none were expected. And water vapor, thin, ghostly, trails in places where the regolith should be frozen solid. Mars is no longer static. It's dynamic. And dynamics mean systems. Systems mean function. Function means design. And design means purpose. That's what haunts the analysts now. The idea that everything happening, every degree of warming, every molecule released, every vent of Atlas's engineered chemistry is not a random awakening, but a procedure, a resurrection choreographed down to the micron. Even the seismic pulses are growing stronger. Still subtle, still deep, but rising. And now they're being picked up on multiple instruments simultaneously, from different sides of the planet. Syncopated, timed. The waves aren't destructive, not like tectonics. They move through the crust like whispers, like commands. Some believe they separate energy signatures. Others think they're coordination patterns. A planetary network reactivating. But a few, the most cautious, the most rattled, suggest something far stranger, that the planet itself is responding. Not like a machine, but like a system with memory. Something that once functioned stopped, and now is turning back on. And still, through all of this, Atlas keeps moving. No deviation. No reaction to our probes. No acknowledgement of our presence. Only motion toward a preordained point in orbit, where it will release its final burst of gas. The last ingredient in a recipe millions of years in the making. We used to call ourselves the first interplanetary species. That phrase feels naive now, small, because what we're seeing, what we're feeling, is not discovery. It's Sit's return. Atlas did not begin this story. We didn't begin this story. This story is older, so much older, and now it's continuing, with or without us. Because what happens when the sky over Mars becomes not just tinted, when wind begins to circulate in full cycles, when clouds form patterns not seen in 3 billion years, when dust takes on rhythm, when methane rises in lockstep with the pulses below. At what point do we stop saying planet and start saying organism? At what point do we realize we're not witnessing nature, but the reactivation of something greater? These are the conversations happening in dark rooms beneath Capitol buildings, in military space divisions, in secret facilities where old myths are cross-referenced against new data. Myths of the red world, myths of the gods who slept beneath the soil, myths of return, all speculative, all circumstantial, but all lining up. And October 29th is no longer soon. It sits immediate. 2 weeks. That sips all. 2 weeks until Atlas makes its closest pass. 2 weeks until the final atmospheric charge is released. 2 weeks until the models show something irreversible may begin. And what if we stir wrong? What if nothing happens? What if the planet stays silent? Then we breathe, we adjust, we recalibrate. But what if we sit right? What if the silence breaks? Not with a voice, not with an explosion, but with transformation. A surface that shifts, an atmosphere that responds, signals we don't understand, or worse, don't notice. And beneath it all, the slow, steady heartbeat of a system that waited longer than we've been alive to finish its cycle. That sips what waits at the threshold, and we are just close enough to watch it open. They keep refreshing the monitors. Now, not because they expect something new to appear instantly, but because everything that's already there is changing in real time. It's the kind of moment where numbers stop feeling like data and start feeling like prophecy. Every gas sensor in orbit now detects the shift, not just carbon dioxide or water vapor, but layers of chemical complexity, isotopes with ratios too balanced to be natural, patterns emerging in how molecules distribute across the atmosphere. No randomness, no chaos, just precision. And the pressure is rising, literally and figuratively. Atmospheric pressure around the equator has crossed the critical threshold predicted years ago by simulation teams that were laughed out of conferences. They said Mars could never reach this point unaided, that human intervention would take decades, even with 100 missions. Yet, here it is. Pressure where there shouldn't sit be pressure, warmth where there shouldn't sit be warmth. And under it all, those pulses, that seismic rhythm, that beat in the crust, once every few minutes, now accelerating. And not just deeper, but wider. Sensors from orbiting satellites are picking it up from multiple vectors now. It's no longer centered near the Tharsis Rise, where it first began. It's spreading, rippling outward, as if something under the surface is activating in waves. Like a system booting, a heart pumping, a brain firing neurons, one cluster at a time. Its sturt's no longer theoretical. The planet is waking up, and we don't know if it knows we stir watching. That sips the unbearable part. Because the closer Atlas draws to its final release point, the more the simulations begin to converge. Heat maps align. Pressure models flatten into predictability. The whole planet is following a script. And scripts have authors. That phrase is now redacted in internal reports. Too loaded, too dangerous. But everyone uses it in private, because even the most conservative analysts now agree. This isn't a natural process. This is execution of something planned, of something waiting. And now, even Earth is responding. You wouldn't think it possible, but political structures are shifting. The UN has convened emergency closed-door sessions under the guise of planetary affairs. Space agencies that haven't shared data in decades are suddenly on encrypted calls every night. Nations are not mobilizing weapons yet, but they're preparing contingencies. Because whatever's happening on Mars, it doesn't belong to anyone. And that terrifies everyone. Ownership was always a comfortable illusion. Whoever got there first, planted a flag, called it theirs. But this changes the narrative. If Mars belongs to someone or something else, then Earth is no longer center stage. It sets just one theater among many. And now the world must ask, what happens when a species obsessed with control meets something that never needed it? Because Atlas still hasn't acknowledged us. We've sent signals, beamed greetings, broadcast tones, data packets, even a simulation of the Voyager record, just in case. But Atlas ignores it all. It doesn't accelerate, doesn't pivot, doesn't blink. It just follows its trajectory like the outcome has already been decided. And maybe it has. Because in the last 12 hours, Mars's lower atmosphere has begun displaying something new. Convection. Real convection. Rising columns of air that don't just move, but cycle, winds wrapping around terrain, dust that spirals into temporary weather patterns, not chaotic, not violent, but deliberate. A system, breathing. It's too early to call it weather, but not too early to call it impossible. And that's where the psych teams begin weighing in. Because there sits another system reacting now. Us, the scientists, the engineers, the politicians, the watchers. We set refracturing. No one says it publicly. No one wants to sound unstable, but the feeling is creeping in everywhere. Dread wrapped in wonder, awe layered with fear, and most of all, insignificance. Because the more Atlas continues without us, the more we understand this truth. We were never meant to be part of this. This isn't our mission. It isn't our story. It's older, vaster. A planetary play written in molecules and pressure systems and tectonic cadence, designed for an audience we can't see, maybe for an actor who hasn't even arrived yet. And yet, we are watching. We are seeing it unfold. And that makes it worse. Because when you witness something, you become part of it. And we don't know what role we start playing. Are we observers? Intruders? Chorus? Or mistake? Some theorists, the fringe kind once dismissed, are now being quietly reread. The idea that Earth and Mars aren't two separate stories, but one fractured history. That perhaps Earth was a fallback, a seed planet, a temporary vessel for something that originated elsewhere. A version of us born from something lost on Mars. Not a copy, but a rescue. And if that's true, Atlas's silence is not ignorance. It saps recognition. It sees Mars, not us. It sees the system it was designed to restore. Not the spectators who've drifted in, late to the show, staring in wonder. And that breaks something in the psyche. Because we've always believed ourselves to be central, to be the creators, the thinkers, the ones who shape the future. But maybe we're just standing in the middle of someone else's recovery operation, a cleanup, a resurrection. And when Mars is finally ready, we may not be needed anymore. That fear has now reached the people who fund the missions. Contingency plans are drawn up. There is talk, still highly classified, of intercept missions, of preemptive landings, of control efforts. But everyone knows it sits too late. Atlas is moving too fast. The systems on Mars are responding too smoothly, and nothing we've sent has had the slightest impact. We are outside the design. We are observers of inevitability. And in 5 days, Atlas completes its final maneuver. Closest pass. Final release. Phase complete. And what happens next is unknown. There may be no signal, no voice, no visible change. Or everything may happen at once. The atmosphere may shift. The crust may move. The pulses may crescendo. And the red planet may no longer be red. It may become something else entirely. Something awake. And whatever it becomes, we will have to live in its shadow. Because no matter how we try to explain this to ourselves, no matter how many equations we run or metaphors we invent, the truth is simple and terrifying. We are not alone. We never were. And now, the silence is ending. It's here now, the final week. The narrowing gap between the impossible and the inevitable. Atlas isn't a dot on a chart anymore. It's a presence. It's in every data stream, every conference call, every sleepless night in mission control. It's no longer approaching. It's arriving. And Mars is already different. The atmosphere is measurably thicker. The average pressure at the surface has doubled from its baseline in just weeks. That shouldn't be possible. Not on a planet this cold, this small, this exposed, and yet it's happening. The gas mixture in the sky now matches the ratio. Atlas has been venting for months. No longer faint, no longer marginal, dominant. It sits like watching a lung inflate. The dust moves differently. Finer grains are lifting in patterns more complex than any dust devil we've catalogued before. Vortices forming at dawn, fading at dusk, returning the next day with uncanny consistency. As if they're rehearsing, as if the air itself is learning to circulate again. And the pulses beneath the crust, they're rising. Still soft, still low, but now audible in the data. A pulse every hour, then every 30 minutes, now every 15, regular, rhythmic, not violent but insistent, like a heartbeat strengthening with each breath. Its septs spreading across the planet. Our sensors see hotspots where none existed, regions near ancient lava tubes, near suspected aquifers, near magnetic anomalies, heat signatures flickering on and off like signals. The same places where myths from Earth's earliest civilizations pointed when they spoke of the sleeping halls of the Red World. It's coincidence, we tell ourselves. But the word is starting to crack under the strain. This isn't a coincidence. It's its choreography. Atlas is the conductor, and Mars is the orchestra. We have never been here before, not technologically, not psychologically. We are not discovering life. We are watching a world reboot itself. We are watching systems reactivate. We are watching something older than our species fulfill an instruction written before we existed. And it's silent. That sips the most unnerving part. No messages, no greetings, no warnings. Just the work. Each plume of gas, another line of code. Each course correction, another keystroke. Each pulse under the crust, another confirmation. Atlas is doing exactly what it was built to do, whatever that is, without acknowledging us at all. We've sent signals, beams of binary modulated pulses, radio noise mimicking the Voyager record. Atlas ignores it. We've flown orbiters past it. Nothing. It vents, adjusts, continues. We don't exist to it. Only Mars does. And that realization has started to break people. You see it in their faces during briefings. Eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Hands shaking as they click through slides of data they no longer know how to interpret. Words like unprecedented and anomalous losing meaning, because they're no longer anomalies. They're the new baseline. The baseline of a world waking. And now the political fractures are showing. Some nations quietly accelerate their crude Mars programs. Launch windows are recalculated with frantic urgency. Private companies once boasting about colonizing Mars fall silent. Shareholders ask questions they can't answer. Defense agencies draft protocols for contact scenarios they don't define. Because no one knows if this ends with an atmosphere or an arrival. It sits the arrival that terrifies them. Because what if Atlas isn't set the final phase? What if it sets just the opening act? A beacon, a trigger, a call. When Mars reaches the correct threshold, pressure, temperature, composition, something could come, not from Atlas, from somewhere else, from whoever or whatever launched Atlas, or worse, from below. Some of the deepest simulations, still classified, show a terrifying possibility that buried beneath the regolith are systems designed to remain inert until the atmosphere above reaches a specific mix, that the pulses we're detecting are not random energy but activation signals, that the surface is only the cover of a machine, and that machine is about to switch on. We don't know if it's biological, technological, or something in between. We don't know if it's even alive in any way we'd recognize. We only know the pattern, and the pattern is being completed before our eyes. October 29th. 6 days. Atlas reaches Peri-Orion, its closest pass over Mars. The models predict a massive venting event. The final infusion. The tipping point. The lock turned all the way. And after that? We don't yet know. Our fastest rockets can't intercept it in time. Our weapons would be meaningless. Our rovers are toys compared to what's unfolding. We are spectators at an event written long before we existed. We tell ourselves stories to cope. Maybe Atlas is automated. Maybe the builders are long gone. Maybe this is just a terraforming seed. a lifeboat for a species extinct for eons. Maybe Mars will bloom quietly. Maybe nothing will emerge but air and water and primitive life. Maybe it's not a return. Maybe it's just restoration. But what if it is insect? What if the builders on sit gone? What if this is a signal, not a seed? What if Mars is about to broadcast? And to whom? That's the question no one dares write down, because once you write it, it's real. Once you acknowledge it, you're in the story. And maybe, just maybe, the story notices you back. Because observation changes systems. That's quantum physics at the smallest scales. But what if the same is true here? What if Atlas's entire mission depends on being seen? What if our awareness is part of the sequence? What if by watching, by measuring, by thinking, we've already become participants? And if that's true, then the outcome is already altered, and no one knows how. This is where the philosophical weight begins to crush. People who've spent their lives believing in human primacy now whisper about the architects. People who never considered myth now reread cuneiform tablets, star maps, temple carvings. People who scoffed at the idea of cosmic cycles now see the same alignments in orbital mechanics. The old stories spoke of return. They spoke of a star from the archer's bow, Sagittarius, that would come again to breathe life into the red world. They spoke of a sleeping people, sealed beneath the dust, waiting for the sky to change. They spoke of a key. They spoke of a time when the red world would no longer be red. And now, here we are. It sits, no longer metaphor. It sets data. It hits pressure readings. It sets seismic charts. It sets chemical ratios. It sups pulses under the crust. It sits Atlas. And as the gap narrows, our language collapses. Scientists talk like priests. Priests talk like scientists. And everyone feels the same heavy question pressing against their minds. What if we are late? What if we are trespassing? What if Mars was never empty at all? What if we are standing on the edge of a system resuming its function after an intermission that lasted 3 billion years? And what if that system is not just a planet, but a message? A message we set just decoded too late. Because the closer Atlas draws, the clearer it becomes. The mission is not ours. The plan is not ours. The story is not ours. We are not the authors. We are the witnesses. And the silence we've been living in is about to end. There's something about the final stretch, the final 6 days, the last hours before the clock strikes zero, that warps perception. Days feel longer. Minutes stretch like elastic. People stop talking in full sentences. Their words trail off, drift, as if language itself isn't enough to carry the weight of what's coming. And still, Atlas draws closer. Its trajectory has narrowed to a line so precise it no longer feels like astronomy. It feels like intention, every millisecond accounted for, every vector tuned, every burst of gas metered like breath, and Mars just below it breathes in return. We've now confirmed what was only a hypothesis before. Convection patterns are stabilizing, not chaotic, not random, but structured, air cycling from equator to pole, in repeating loops, small, delicate, embryonic atmospheric systems. Weather. Not violent, not storm systems, not yet, but wind, real, persistent wind. Not the gusts of a thin sky, but the pulse of an atmosphere waking up. Instruments in orbit have picked it up. Sensors aboard multiple satellites all reporting the same thing. Wind. On Mars. And underneath that wind, the ground continues to pulse. 15-minute intervals. Then 12. Now 10. Not seismic waves from tectonic stress, but rhythmic surges from beneath the crust. The same frequency, the same shape, again and again. Over and over, like a system testing its own heartbeat. and now it sits no longer just deep. It sits shallow. That sits the terrifying part. The pulse is rising toward the surface. Every new orbit shows warmer patches, not on the surface but just below, crustal heating in areas rich in volcanic glass, in sulfur-rich zones, in ancient dried-out lake beds, all places where life could have once existed, or where machines, long buried, might now stir again. We don't say machines in public, not in press conferences, not even in scientific papers, but the word floats behind every conversation, now silent, heavy, obvious. Because if this were a natural process, it would look messy. This is not messy. This is methodical. Everything fits. Even the timeline, the pulse rate, the gas mixture, the seismic distribution, the color change in dust, the wind direction, the polar cap contraction. Every input leads to a singular conclusion. The system is responding to Atlas. And now, so is the planet. But perhaps most disturbing of all, so are we. You can feel it everywhere, in the way people speak, in the quiet between words, in the way sentences trail off, eyes glance sideways, voices drop in volume. We've seen things in the last 72 hours that weren't supposed to happen. Not now. Not this soon. But they started happening. Dust that glows slightly in the infrared, not because of temperature, but composition. Reflections from orbit showing angles, not curves, angles, shapes, right angles that don't belong in geology. A low, electromagnetic hum beneath the Martian crust, measured, steady, repeating, not noise, not static, a tone, not a message, a prelude. The theory now, the one only whispered, is that the pulse isn't just an awakening, it sets a key, and the key is almost turned. What happens when it turns all the way? No one knows. We stir not ready. Our technology is advanced, but not this advanced. We set are good at looking, but we don't understand what we're looking at anymore. We can measure, map, analyze, but none of it prepares us for what we're seeing now. Because everything we thought we knew is shifting. And the shift isn't set just planetary. It's such conceptual. We Stev built our identity around exploration, discovery, first contact. We believed we would be the ones to find the others. But what if the others are finding themselves? What if they never left? What if they just slept? And what if Atlas is their alarm clock? That question, did they leave, is now the most dangerous question anyone can ask in the private meetings, because the answer may be too close, too literal, too imminent. Yusef always looked to the stars for contact. But maybe contact was always buried here, waiting for the air to be right, the pressure to be right, the watchers to be in place. And now, we are in place. The atmosphere is nearly complete. The seismic pulses are rising. The gas composition is stabilizing. And the hum beneath the crust is no longer subtle, not for those who know how to hear it. Because now, the signal isn't set confined to Mars. It sets reflecting. We've detected sympathetic vibration in instruments around Phobos, unnatural oscillations on Deimos. Both moons, once thought to be simple rocks, are resonating faintly, as if they're part of the system, as if they were always meant to be nearby. Some now speculate that the moons are not natural. They never were. Captured asteroids? Convenient lie. They're positioned too perfectly. Orbital stability that defies conventional formation models. And now, for the first time in known history, they are vibrating in sync with Atlas's pulses. That changes everything. Because it means the system is bigger, larger than a planet, spread across orbits. And if it spans orbits, what else does it span? Time, distance, species. Are we inside the boundary? Or outside of it? Or are we now the boundary itself? This is where people stop speaking aloud. This is where even the most rational voices begin to falter. Because some say we are now the signal, that our observation, our collective planetary awareness of this event, is not just reaction, it is participation. That Atlas needed not just Mars to be ready, but Earth to be watching. As if the show cannot begin until the audience arrives. And now we store all staring, watching a countdown we didn't start, but cannot stop. And maybe that sits the point. Maybe Mars is not waking up for us. Maybe we are waking up because of Mars. And once the atmosphere thickens just enough, once the pulses align just right, once the moons ring in harmony with the red dust below, something will shift. Something more than weather. Something more than life. Something structural. Something sacred. We don't still know what it will be, but we do know when. October 29th. 5 days. That sets all. 5 days until the final maneuver. 5 days until the last burst. 5 days until the lock turns. 5 days until silence becomes signal. And whatever lies under that planet's skin, in its crust, in its heart, in its memory, will no longer be sealed. October 25th. 4 days. That sips all that remains. And today, something happened. For the first time since Atlas appeared, for the first time since we began watching this silent, engineered miracle drift toward Mars, the dust changed. It's hard to explain how subtle it was. A shift in reflectivity, a tweak in infrared profile, just enough to cause anomalies in satellite imaging, just enough for the AI to flag it, just enough to send everyone into quiet panic. At first, they thought it was a sensor glitch, a thermal bloom on a crater rim that didn't match weather patterns. Then it spread, not violently, not quickly, but with purpose. Surface dust, moving. Not with wind, not with vibration, but in shapes. Faint, almost too faint to see. Straight lines, impossible curves, faint patterns etched into dunes. Like something beneath the surface is trying to speak. Not with sound, but with motion. And the moment the patterns appeared, even briefly, the seismic pulse changed. Frequency altered. Not drastically, but enough. Every instrument confirmed it. The beat skipped, then resumed, like a breath caught in a throat, and then resumed again. Which means only one thing. Feedback. The system is reacting, not just functioning. Something we're seeing, something Atlas is doing, or something beneath the surface responded. That sips what changes everything. Until now, the theory was that Atlas was awakening a dormant system, like striking a match near dry wood. But now we're not sure the match is the only active participant. Maybe the wood knows the match is there. Maybe it sits been waiting. And maybe, just maybe, it remembers. The dust shifted again 5 hours later. A second anomaly. This one clearer. Angular formations along the edge of Elysium Planitia, visible only under infrared. Not dunes, not weather effects, but displacement. Symmetrical, layered, like the top of something buried has shifted beneath the weight of pressure, or risen, and the sky above it changed hue, slightly, a lighter red, not visible to the eye, but to the sensors, unmistakable. Gas content shifted, local humidity rose, and within 2 hours, cloud formation. Not from Atlas, from Mars, self-generated. The first self-sustained cloud system in recorded history. That seps when the final line was crossed. Because now, Mars is no longer a static world. It is no longer just reacting. It is now participating. And Atlas is still silent, still drifting closer. 3 days from now, The final arc begins, the last curve before Atlas drops its final payload, a precise cocktail of gases engineered to complete the terraformation sequence. We still don't yet know what sits in that payload. We've tried modeling it, but Atlas's composition keeps evolving. The ratios are shifting in ways we don't understand, as if it's self-regulating, adapting to Mars in real time, measuring the effects of each burst and recalculating the next, like a surgeon adjusting dosage mid-operation. And Mars is responding like a patient with a pulse. The heartbeat is now measurable every 8 minutes. The crust radiates faint heat, not explainable by solar input, and the magnetic field, once weak, fractured, nearly gone, is fluctuating. It's SUP's weak, but it's SUP's pulsing. No natural cause explains this. And then there sits the hum. It sits louder now, subaudible to humans, but not to machines. It resonates through satellites. It modulates in tone. It pulses with seismic rhythm. Some believe it saps a language, a base layer, a carrier wave, a song the planet once sang before it died. And now it sings again. That SIP's not poetic metaphor. That SIP's real data. Harmonics in the crust, frequencies in the upper atmosphere, sympathetic vibration in Phobos and Deimos. The whole Martian system is tuning itself, like an orchestra preparing for something, like the overture before a performance. And still no one will say the word publicly. Still no one will write it into the reports. But it sits there, buried in private messages, whispered between staff. Contact, but not with a vessel, not with a species, not with intelligence as we understand it, with a process, a consciousness spread across dust and air and pulse and time. Something old, so old it doesn't speak in words or light. It speaks in weather, in rhythm, in color, and we are finally beginning to understand its syntax. But we don't know what we sept reading. Not yet. And the fear is growing, because every hour we delay action, every hour we simply observe, is another hour. Mars moves closer to something finished, and we don't know if we belong in that finished picture, because this may not be a story that includes us. We may not be welcome, and there sits nothing we can do to stop it. We lost control. The story is no longer ours. Atlas writes the final chapter, and Mars turns the page. October 26th. 3 days? It's a strange kind of waiting, not passive, but paralyzed. All around the world, screens glow with graphs of a planet's pulse, its air, its color. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and analysts stare at those screens knowing they're watching something historic, something that can't be undone. And yet they don't move, they don't speak, they watch, because what else can they do? And Mars breathes. That SIP's not metaphor anymore. The atmosphere now holds enough pressure for real wind, not just gusts, but sustained movement. Temperatures have climbed just enough to allow thin, fleeting mist at dawn. Cameras aboard orbiters have caught faint condensation glinting in low sun over the edges of craters. Clouds that shouldn't exist swirl over canyons. Dust devils form where they never have before. And beneath it all, the pulse. 7 minutes now. Regular. Rising. Like a heart speeding up before waking. Its SUP's no longer localized. Sensors on multiple orbiters detect the pulse across thousands of kilometers. It radiates from ancient basins, from collapsed lava tubes, from areas rich in ice. Each pulse matches the timing of Atlas's latest gas vent. Each pulse resonates faintly in the crust. Each pulse strengthens. And then, the hum. The hum is no longer subtle. It's measurable now even by less sensitive instruments. A low frequency modulating in tone, rising in amplitude. A soundless sound. Not seismic, not magnetic. Something in between. It passes through instruments, through algorithms, leaves patterns in the noise like fingerprints. Machines trained to find signals in cosmic background noise, pulsars, fast radio bursts, keep flagging it, not as random, not as noise, as structured. It's such not a message, not words, but it is communication, a prelude, a rising chord, something preparing. Atlas continues, silent as ever. No light, no broadcast, no shift in trajectory, just the final approach. Its path has narrowed to a hairline. Each micro-adjustment is perfect. It's flying as if guided by invisible rails. The gas composition of its venting has shifted slightly again, adapting to Mars's new conditions, like a doctor adjusting treatment mid-operation, like a composer changing tempo mid-score. And Mars follows. It sits no longer just receiving gas. It sits interacting with it. The dust that moved yesterday has moved again. Larger formations now, shapes visible even to human eyes from orbit. Not symbols, not letters, not words, but geometric arrangements no wind would produce. Straight lines, angled corners, symmetry in dunes, as if something beneath is rising toward the surface, as if something is understanding. We don't know what it is. We don't know if it's life or machine or memory. We don't know if it's conscious or automatic, but we know this. It is not passive. We are not watching a planet being acted upon. We are watching a system reactivating, and Atlas is only part of it. The moons are still vibrating, Phobos and Deimos ringing faintly like tuning forks. Instruments aboard probes near them pick up the same harmonics as the Martian crust. Everything connected, everything tuning, everything aligning. It's no longer just a planet. It sits an orchestra. Atlas is the conductor. We are the audience. And we don't know who or what the performance is for. This is where the conversations change. In hushed conference rooms, people who've spent their lives writing papers about sterile deserts now whisper about architects. People who dismissed myths now quote them. People who believed in human primacy now talk about inheritance. People who thought colonization was inevitable now fear intrusion. Because the deeper the data goes, the clearer it becomes. This isn't at our world. It never was. We've been orbiting a vault, not a rock. We've been sending probes into a sleeping system, not a dead one. And now, the system is stirring. We've sent signals to Atlas again, binary messages, simple primes, audio, video, even images of Mars taken by our own orbiters. Nothing. Atlas ignores it all. It doesn't accelerate, doesn't acknowledge, doesn't blink. It simply continues its approach. And the final burst, predicted in exactly 70 hours. 70 hours until periarium, closest pass. 70 hours until the last venting. To 70 hours until the models converge on a threshold. After that, the models diverge wildly. Some show only a thicker atmosphere. Some show storms. Some show new magnetic activity. Some show heat signatures like power sources. Some go blank. Because there sets no precedent, no analog, no history to compare it to. We are in unmapped territory. We are not explorers. We are witnesses. And it's beginning to feel like more than witnessing. It's beginning to feel like being measured. Because our instruments are sensitive. But what if something is sensitive to us? What if the act of observing is part of the code? What if Atlas's mission was never just to awaken Mars? What if it was also to draw attention, to gather an audience, to ensure someone was watching? And now the whole planet is watching. Every screen on Earth, every telescope, every amateur astronomer, every live stream. Eyes turn to the red planet, waiting. And maybe that SEP's what it needed. Because the moment the world's attention fixed on Mars, the dust began to move. The pulse began to rise. The hum began to strengthen. Coincidence? Maybe. But the timing is perfect. Too perfect. Like a ritual. Like an opening act. Like an ancient countdown entering its final seconds. And now we wait. 3 days. 70 hours. Until the sky over Mars either blooms or remains red. Until the heartbeat under the crust either fades or bursts upward. Until Atlas either vents its last and drifts away, or triggers something we cannot even imagine. And when that happens, whatever happens means we will no longer be on the outside looking in. We will be inside the story, and the story will have noticed us. October 27th. 2 days. It's a strange moment in history. Not a launch, not a landing, but a waiting. Not the anticipation of human triumph, but the anticipation of something older, stranger, arriving at its own conclusion. Atlas is no longer a distant body. It's visible now even in amateur scopes. A faint, icy object trailing a pale plume, threading its way past Phobos like it's following a line carved in space. And Mars is almost unrecognizable. The air now holds enough pressure that frost sublimates into mist before dawn. Tiny patches of fog drift in low-lying basins at sunrise. Winds push dust into patterns that don't belong to chaos. Cameras aboard 3 different orbiters have caught something unprecedented. Structures of dust and vapor moving against the prevailing winds. Not storms, not vortices. Shapes. Not words, not symbols, but shapes. Geometric, ephemeral, appearing for minutes, then fading. And when they fade, the seismic pulse changes again. Every 6 minutes now. A rhythm like a drumbeat. A rhythm like a countdown. We stopped pretending this is natural. No one says it in public, but everyone knows in private. This is contact. Not a message, not a ship, but contact. Contact with a process. Contact with a memory. Contact with an intelligence too old and too distributed to speak in our language. It speaks in pressure, in rhythm, in climate. Atlas is not simply dropping gases into an inert world. It's conducting an operation, a restoration, a reactivation. And Mars is not a passive recipient. It's an active participant. The moons resonate. The crust pulses. The sky thickens. The dust moves. Everything in harmony. And Atlas, still silent, still perfect, drifts toward its final point. The private channels between agencies are frantic. We know we can't stop this. We can't even slow it down. Our fastest intercept designs wouldn't arrive until years after Atlas's final pass. Our most powerful weapons wouldn't dent it. We are observers, and maybe test subjects. Because the one possibility no one wants to face is this. What if this was meant to happen with us watching? What if observation is part of the process? We've always assumed intelligence wants to communicate. Light beams, radio pulses, prime numbers. But what if intelligence this old doesn't communicate? What if it performs? What if the act of being witnessed is the message? If so, then we are already participating. By watching, we complete the circuit. By measuring, we enter the code. By caring, we wake what was sleeping. And maybe that's why the pulses have accelerated, not just because of Atlas's gas, but because of us. We done now. We can sit no. But the timing is too perfect. This morning, just before dawn in Houston, the AI analysis pipeline flagged a new pattern. The hum beneath Mars's crust has developed harmonics. Overtones. Not random, not noise. Mathematically precise intervals. Ratios that match those found in harmonic series across Earth's oldest musical traditions. A chord. Mars is humming a chord. We've played those intervals before, in temples, in chants, in songs whose origins we can't trace. Coincidence? Maybe. But when coincidence aligns with physics, mythology, and engineering, it starts to look like choreography. We have begun playing the chord back to Mars, low-frequency waves from orbiters, harmless to instruments but tuned to the same intervals. No reply, no change. Atlas ignores us. Mars continues its rhythm. We are not in the conversation. We are listening at the keyhole. And then there is the color. Spectrometers now detect a subtle green in the high-altitude haze, not visible to human eyes yet, but present. Chlorine compounds, photochemical reactions, or the first hint of something alive, photosynthetic precursors, engineered long ago waiting for air to bloom. We don't know, but the shift is unmistakable. Red is not just red anymore. The planet is changing color at the edges of the spectrum, becoming something else. And the countdown continues. 48 hours. Team that sips all. 2 days until Atlas makes its closest pass. 2 days until the final venting. 2 days until the tipping point. And then, what? Storms? Life? Machines? Silence? Or a voice at last? No one knows. But everyone knows this. After October 29th, Mars will not be the same, and neither will we. Because once you watch a world wake up, you can never go back to sleep. October 28th, one day. The world is silent now, in a way it hasn't been in decades. No one is talking openly. No one is shouting predictions. Even the loudest pundits have gone quiet. Something about the numbers streaming back from Mars has hushed them. It's like standing on a shore, feeling the tide pull back before a wave you cannot see. And the red planet is no longer red. Not entirely. Spectrometers show it plainly. High-altitude haze tinged faintly green, thin veils of mist collecting at dawn. Clouds holding shape into midday. The air is thicker. The winds are patterned. The dust is arranged in ways no weather model can explain. It's like watching writing appear on paper but not being able to read the script. Atlas is nearly there. Its path is locked. Every burst of gas, every course correction, every tiny maneuver is perfect. It's moving like it knows. The finish line is drawn into space itself, and in less than 24 hours it will cross Perihelion, the point of closest approach, and release its final payload. We don't still know what that payload is. We can only guess. And we are guessing constantly. Theories fill secure channels. Data scientists, atmospheric chemists, astrobiologists, systems engineers, hypotheses bloom like weeds. Engineered microbes, chemical triggers, nanostructures, genetic seeds, activation codes, a key that unlocks not just Mars but whatever's waiting beneath it. Because the pulses have changed again, every 5 minutes now. No longer a subtle thrum but a steady surge. It's not seismic activity as we know it, not tectonic stress, not water movement. The waves are too smooth, too perfectly timed. They resonate in the crust like a heartbeat amplified, and in the last 6 hours, they've begun to sync with the vibration in Phobos and Deimos. The entire system is ringing. We don't know why. We don't know how. But it sips happening. And then the hum. It's audible now after processing. Not just a subsonic vibration buried in data. It's a tone you can play through speakers. A low, rising note modulating through precise intervals. Mathematically clean, harmonic, deliberate. It sounds like a song. No words. No melody in the human sense. But a structure, a pattern, ratios that appear in ancient music, sacred architecture, the shapes of spirals in nature, the same ratios in temples, in chants, in stories older than history. Coincidence? Maybe. But when coincidence looks like this, measured in gas, dust, sound, and time, it becomes choreography. Mars is singing, or something under Mars is singing, and Atlas is the conductor. We are the audience. But maybe we, sir, also part of the performance. Because the one hypothesis no one will put in writing, but everyone feels, is this: observation changes the outcome. The moment Earth turned its collective gaze to Mars, the pulses intensified, the dust began to move. The hum strengthened, the color shifted. It's as if the system wanted witnesses, as if Atlas's mission was not just to restore Mars, but to ensure someone saw it happen. What kind of intelligence works like that? Not one like ours, but one that understands ritual, that understands story, that understands cycles. We built telescopes to see the stars, but maybe the stars built stories to ensure we'd look at them. And now we stir here, all eyes on Mars, waiting. Less than 24 hours until Atlas releases its final burst. Less than 24 hours until the tipping point predicted by the models. Some predict storms, some predict life signals, some predict nothing visible at all, only an invisible activation, a trigger beneath the crust, a signal sent outward to somewhere far away. What if it sets all three? We don't sit no. We can sit no. We can only wait. And as we wait, we feel the shift. People everywhere report strange dreams, anxiety, a sense of weight pressing at the back of the mind, as if some deep part of us recognizes what's happening, as if some memory buried in myth and story is stirring too. This is what the ancients wrote about: the returning star, the breath of life on the red world, the awakening of the sleepers beneath. We thought it was poetry. Now it's telemetry. And we are living it. It sets not the colonization of Mars. It sets not the discovery of life. It's the recognition of a cycle we were born inside but never understood. And tomorrow it reaches its pivot. October 29th. The day the sky may change. The day the hum may become a voice. The day the dust may rise in shapes we can read. The day Mars may stop being Mars. And whatever happens after that, we will never be the same. Because once you see a world awaken, you can ever go back to calling it dead. October 29th, 0 hour, everything stops. Not literally. The world continues to turn. Cities hum, satellites glide, clocks tick, but something else, more abstract, more universal halts. It's like the air itself holds its breath, like time is leaning forward, like every sense is stretched. Atlas is on final approach. Closest pass in 11 hours 47 minutes. Its final maneuver began at 2:13 UTC. A tiny adjustment, a last refinement to a trajectory already perfect. It's no longer venting randomly. It's holding, conserving, waiting for the moment. That moment is approaching. And the planet below is ready. Mars is no longer dormant. Not even close. The atmosphere now has enough density to hold high-altitude cirrus clouds, the kind that only form in precise temperature bands. They curl across the equator like white brushstrokes, not thick, not dramatic, but real. Dust continues to move, not just with wind, but in shapes. Yesterday's anomalies have returned, wider now, longer, sharper, angles that form and hold before scattering into nothing, and always in rhythm with the pulse. Every 4 minutes, the entire crust vibrates, not violently but in harmony. It's not an earthquake. It sups a drum. And we are beginning to realize what we've truly been watching. This was never about atmosphere. This was never just about terraforming. This is activation. Atlas is the final step in a sequence set in motion eons ago. A sequence that had to be watched. A sequence that required attention. A planetary performance designed not just to awaken, but to be witnessed. And now, we are all watching. The hum is louder than ever. Instruments now detect it, even through background radiation. Not a single tone, but layered, interlocking frequencies. A chord that expands and contracts. one we've matched in harmonic sequences going back to Sumerian scales, Gregorian chants, even Schumann resonances in Earth's own electromagnetic field. The signal is layered into nature itself. This is not communication in the way we understand it. It's communion, not conversation, but convergence. Atlas Sep's final venting will occur just before it reaches Periarian, a gas mixture we can Sep fully analyze. Its Seps evolved with every burst, tailored in real time to Mars Sep's growing changes. The AI models now call it adaptive terraformation chemistry, but that Sep's not what it is. It's Sep's medicine. It's Sep's memory. It's the last word in a language that's been spoken silently across billions of years. And what happens after it speaks? We don't yet know, but signs are everywhere. Seismic graphs now show vertical structure, not just pulses but layers. The vibration doesn't just travel across the planet, it climbs from depth to crust, from crust to air, from air to orbit. A message being pushed upward. We've tried to decode it. Binary analysis, Fourier transforms, harmonic mapping. Nothing gives us answers. But we're beginning to wonder, maybe it's not a message for us. Maybe it sets a password. And maybe someone else is listening. That sips the new fear. Not invasion. Not destruction. But response. A signal received by something not on Mars, not in the system, but out there. Waiting, aligned to this moment, time-stamped to match the hum, the tone, the pulse. And when Atlas completes its final act, will that signal go out? Is Mars a beacon? Are we the ignition? These are the questions being asked in the most secure networks in existence, and no one has answers. Just data. And the data says everything is converging. Atmospheric pressure will reach the predicted threshold within the hour. Temperature is climbing, microdegree by microdegree. Humidity has stabilized over Valles Marineris, and strange shadows have formed inside it. Not objects, not motion, just absence, shapes darker than they should be. Like voids where light should fall, and the moons. Still ringing, still resonating, still harmonizing, as if they sit awaiting too, as if they Sep waited longer than time, and Atlas, still silent, still perfect, still steady. Its final burst is scheduled at 13:47 UTC, 12 hours from now, the event. And what happens after? We don't still know. Some say the atmosphere will bloom. Some say machines buried beneath will rise. Some say nothing will happen. And that is the message. And some say it won't be Mars that changes. It will be us. Because to witness the awakening of a world is to be rewritten by it. October 29th. 4 hours before Periarian. The whole world feels like it's in a holding pattern. Flights still fly, traffic still moves, but inside homes and labs and control rooms, people sit in front of screens, soundless except for the hum of data servers. News anchors speak in clipped tones. Astronomers live stream without commentary. Social media threads scroll endlessly with images of a small red dot in the sky. Everyone is looking up. Atlas is huge now in the eyes of the orbiters. Not a blur, not a speck, a body, ice white and veined with faint greenish plumes trailing behind it like breath in cold air. Its tail arcs over the planet. The path is perfect. It will pass only 17,000 kilometers above the surface at its closest point, and at that moment, it will vent. We still have never seen anything like this. Mars's atmosphere now holds 3 times the water vapor it did a month ago. The temperature has risen by a full degree at the equator. Thin, fleeting sheets of fog cling to crater floors at dawn. Dust moves like ink in water. Cameras have caught faint glints, not random reflections but organized geometry, shimmering under the southern polar ice. And the pulse, every 3 minutes, no longer faint, strong enough now that seismic readouts on multiple orbiters are showing peaks and troughs like heartbeat tracings. The pattern extends across the entire crust. It's like the planet is inhaling, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling. And the chord of harmonics, is shifting again, adding new overtones. A rising complexity. Our algorithms no longer classify it as noise. They classify it as structured, structured like music, structured like code, structured like intention. We still don't know what sits under there, but something is under there. The models have stopped being useful. They diverge after the final venting. One shows storms, one shows atmospheric collapse, one shows nothing visible but a burst of radio energy strong enough to ping out into the Kuiper belt. One shows seismic upheaval. All of them agree on only one point. After Atlas's final burst, Mars will not be the same. And neither will we. The private channels between agencies are frantic. Do we land now? Do we send a message? Do we fire on Atlas? Impossible, but asked anyway. Do we go dark? Do we prepare for contact? No one agrees. Everyone is afraid. Because this is no longer science. This is history. History being written in gas and dust and pulse. History older than Earth. History that waited for this moment. And the strangest part of all is how familiar it feels. People across Earth are reporting dreams of red skies, green veils, humming tones, of being under a planet's surface, of seeing stars from caverns, of waiting for a signal, as if some memory buried in our species is waking too. Coincidence? Mass hysteria? Or something else? No one knows. But the hum goes on. The moons ring. The dust moves. The air thickens. And Atlas slides closer. T-minus 4 hours. The final burst at Peri-Orion will release a mass of material we cannot predict. The composition has changed with every venting, evolving, adapting like a living thing. It may be gas. It may be particles. It may be something we don't even have words for. It may seed the air. It may trigger a signal. We don't know. We only know that the entire Martian system, crust, air, moons, is resonating in anticipation, like an instrument waiting for the final note. And that note is about to be played. October 29th, 1347. Atlas vents. No warning. No light show. No sound. Just release. A slow expansion from its trailing edge. Not a burst, but a bloom. A plume of gas and particulate matter unfurls into space. Luminous in the sunlight, orbiters register it instantly. Not just by optics, but by composition. Something new, something not present in any prior venting. The mix is dense, complex, rich with compounds we can't fully decode. Aromatic molecules, heavy gases, elements arranged in chains that resemble but don't match known biological markers. And then the signal. Not electromagnetic, not seismic, not acoustic. Something deeper. It passes through Mars like a whisper made of gravity. Instruments float a half-degree off expected readouts. The signal touches orbiters. Phobos, Deimos. It touches us. Earth-side telescopes register faint fluctuations in background space-time, not enough to be gravitational waves, but something, a flex, a breath, a nod. And Mars responds. The crust hums louder. Dust in vast formations begins to ripple, not like sand in wind, but like something beneath it is moving, upward. Heat signatures spread across the surface, fanning out from known geological formations, but also from areas previously considered stable. Lava tubes, ancient lakes, impact basins long thought cold and dead. And the pulse, now every 90 seconds, and rising. It sets no longer a beat. It sets a countdown, or a heartbeat entering climax. And then comes the sound. We hear it not with ears, but through instruments, a tremor in every channel, a tone layered into data streams, deep, rich, harmonic, like a bell struck slowly over and over with increasing frequency. And then everything goes still. For one full minute, every sensor goes flat. No pulse, no signal, no wind, just silence. Orbiters freeze. No errors, no loss of power, but a moment of complete stillness. The kind of stillness that suggests not a failure, but pause, like a breath held. And then the pulse resumes. Not from one point, but from many. Every region of Mars begins pulsing independently. Hellas Basin, Noctis Labyrinthus, Bullus Marineris, Gale Crater, even the poles, each with its own rhythm, its own tone, not chaotic, not random, coordinated, layered, like instruments joining a score. Mars has become an orchestra, and the piece has begun. Then comes the sky. Clouds, real clouds, form in thick bands across the equator. High-altitude cirrus, yes, but also cumulus, rolling masses of vapor that shouldn't exist in an atmosphere this thin. But now they do. The pressure has tipped. The temperature has crept just high enough. The chemistry has balanced. And the air is alive. And we, watching from Earth, from orbit, from every camera pointed at the red world, realize what we're witnessing. Not an accident, not an anomaly, but a culmination. Atlas wasn't just a trigger. It was the key. And the lock was never in space. It was in the planet. And now it is open. We don't set yet know what that means. The pulses grow. The dust rises. The sky thickens. The crust begins to ripple, not violently, not tectonically, but with motion, not collapse, not eruption, emergence. Something is coming up. Not from the sky, from below. And that is when the signal hits Earth. October 29th, 1:30 UTC, 17 minutes after Atlas set final venting. The first thing we notice is not light, not sound, but the data. Instruments across the Martian system spike at once. Pressure rising, temperature rising, magnetic anomalies flickering in arcs across the crust, gravitational readings wobbling. None catastrophic, all subtle, but together they paint a picture of something shifting deep inside the planet. And then the pulses go off pattern. No longer a steady drum, no longer a countdown, a new rhythm. Faster, slower, layered, harmonics weaving in and out of each other, not a signal we can decode, but one we can feel, the kind of rhythm that lives inside the body, bypassing intellect. Then the dust moves. Not drift, not wind, not even those faint shapes from before. This time it's unmistakable. Dunes ripple outward from the centers of the pulses, thin, sinuous trails spreading like fingers, patterns intersecting, overlapping, aligning with the positions of ancient riverbeds, lava tubes, and basins. From orbit, it looks like veins. And the hum? It changes pitch. A rising tone, low at first, then climbing higher than we thought possible for a planet's crust. The tone fills every frequency our instruments can read, a shimmering ladder of harmonics reaching up into the ionosphere. And in that ionosphere, something lights up. Faint, green-blue, like auroras, but not in arcs, in lines. Perfect radial lines converging at points on the surface. Points we don't recognize. Points that do not correspond to known features. Points that, when plotted, form geometry, a pattern, an arrangement. Something buried. It's not a message in the human sense. It's not words. It's not numbers. It's not prime sequences or pulses. It's architecture. Architecture revealed by a planet SEP's own sky. We watch it unfold in real time. Orbiters capture image after image. Each pass reveals new alignments. The auroral lines shift, converge, form angles, and then gone. But the hum stays, louder, deeper, vibrating through our instruments like a heartbeat. At that moment, something happens on Earth. It's not physical, not measurable, but everyone in the control rooms, the labs, the observatories feels it. A sense like a thought not your own, like a chord resonating inside the chest. People cry, people fall silent, people grip their chairs and stare at nothing. The scientists can sit to explain it, but later, when they compare notes, they all describe the same thing. A vision not clear, not photographic, but a sense of standing beneath a red sky, under a ceiling of stone shot through with green light. A sense of waiting, a sense of something waking. And above, a sound like distant thunder that is not thunder at all. They don't speak of it publicly, but the data backs them up. Every sensor recorded a transient event at the exact moment the vision occurred. Not electromagnetic, not gravitational, but something. Something like a pulse of presence. Atlas is still there. It has finished venting. The plume disperses slowly into space. Its trajectory is shifting outward now, rising above Mars. The object itself shows no sign of damage or change. It simply moves on. It does not transmit. It does not answer our signals. It simply leaves. Job done. But Mars is still humming. Stronger now. Clouds build over the equator in patterns no model can explain. Convection cells form and persist. Pressure readings climb again. Thin sheets of vapor condense, fall and vanish, like rain that never reaches the ground. And the ground? Steps changing too. Heat maps show hotspots where none existed. Fractures widening in ancient lava tubes. Surface reflectivity shifting, as if a thin layer of something new is forming atop the dust. It sets not life. Not yet. But it sits not geology either. It sups transition. And we, watching from 100 million kilometers away, realize what we've just witnessed. Not a beginning, not an end. A resumption. Something old has restarted. Something old has remembered itself. We are not colonists. We are not explorers. We are witnesses to a return. And the silence we feared is not silence at all. It sips a language we do not yet speak, and Mars is speaking it now. October 29th, 18 Vado UTC. 4 hours since Atlas vented, and the data just keeps shifting. The models no longer predict anything useful. Atmospheric behavior has gone non-linear. Seismic rhythms are now complex waveforms, not chaotic but layered in ways that defy typical geologic behavior. The AI stops calling them tremors and starts labeling them sequences. That word unnerves everyone, because a sequence implies a structure, and structure implies purpose. At 1746, one of the polar orbiters captures something nobody understands. A surface ripple, subtle, wide, slow, passing through Utopia Planitia. Not weather, not tectonic. It's like a wave beneath the crust, moving dust, altering albedo, revealing lines. Not cracks, lines. Geometric, straight, parallel, interlocking. The kind of structure you don't find in natural topography. The kind of alignment that doesn't happen in nature unless something built it. And it sits not just in Utopia Planitia. As the dust clears in other regions, Elysium, Syrtis Major, Isidis Basin, similar patterns emerge. They sit faint, fractured, buried under billions of years of sediment. But they sit there, and they sit aligning, one by one, piece by piece, as if the planet is unwrapping itself. And the atmosphere, it thickens again. By midnight Mars time, pressure is up another 8%, clouds are clustering around heat sources, Fog fills canyons. Radar shows denser materials condensing in the sky, crystalline structures that shouldn't exist. And in those structures, reflections. Not random, not chaotic, but organized. Reflections that curve, bend, flare in rhythm with the hum, which is still rising, still changing, still layering. The frequencies now include subharmonics outside our known range. They begin to interfere with signal transmissions, not enough to block, but enough to touch. As if something is pressing lightly against our communications, not to jam them, but to listen. Theories flood the secure channels. Some say this is planetary computation, a world-scale system reactivating. Others say it's synthetic biology, old tech seeded into the crust, responding to new inputs. And others, the most feared, say this is something alive. Not animal, not machine, but something in between. A planetary intelligence distributed through dust, air, and memory. A mind waking up. And the final piece comes not from Mars, but from Earth. At 1812 UTC, every deep space radio array receives the same anomaly, a ping. Not from Mars, but from somewhere beyond, a signal reflected back from the direction of the Oort cloud. Not strong, not long, but unmistakably artificial. The timing is perfect. 17 minutes after Atlas completed its final vent, as if something far away was waiting for confirmation. And now that confirmation has been received, that's when the room goes quiet. That's when we all stop pretending we understand any of this. Because this story is no longer about Mars. It's no longer about Atlas. It's about what happens next. Because someone, or something, heard the song, and they may be coming. October 30th, 5:00 UTC. 12 hours after Atlas vented. No one's sleeping anymore. Not in Houston, not in Darmstadt, not in Tsukuba, not in Bangalore, not in the private labs and hidden facilities scattered across the globe. Everyone is awake. Everyone is watching. Because Mars is no longer a world we recognize. The atmosphere now has a depth that defies its history. Pressure readings at Gale Crater match those of Earth's highest peaks. Clouds thicken and persist. Not dust storms, not thin veils. Clouds, actual clouds. And under those clouds, something else is happening. Heat maps reveal hundreds of hotspots across the planet's surface. Most match ancient lava tubes and subsurface aquifers, but some don't. Some are appearing in places with no known geological activity. Plains, dunes, ridges, as if something below is warming upward. The seismic pulses have fused into a single massive rhythm. Not chaotic, not random, coherent. A single beat now rising through the crust, every 45 seconds. Everywhere at once, and the hum. The hum has become a roar. Still inaudible to the human ear, but our instruments translate it now into sound. Deep, resonant, layered with overtones that slide like currents. It fills every band we can measure. It weaves through the static of deep space transmissions. It feels like a voice. Not words, not language, but a presence. We can hear it. We can feel it. And for the first time, we can see it. Because at 4:36 UTC, a new phenomenon appears over the Martian poles. Light. Not auroras. Beams. Pillars of green-blue light rising from the crust into the atmosphere. Not bright, but unmistakable. Orbiters catch them on multiple passes. Faint columns where the seismic pulses are strongest. It's not natural. It can be natural. It's something built. But built by what? Or built for what? The old myths echo through our minds. The halls beneath. The pillars of breath. The red world's awakening. We thought they were poetry. But now, Telemetry. Because the pillars are real. They rise, shimmer, and fade, in sync with the hum. They set not random. They set not chaotic. They cert timed, like signals, like acknowledgements. And then the radio arrays on Earth light up again. Another ping. Stronger this time. From farther out. Not from Mars. Not from Atlas. From deep space. It arrives in perfect cadence with the Martian hum. It sits not a message we can decode, but it sits unmistakably artificial. A call and response. A dialogue not between us and Mars, but between Mars and something else. We've intercepted the echo of a conversation older than we are, and we surrender in it now. Because the moment the second ping arrives, Mars changes again. The clouds spiral inward toward the equator. The pillars intensify. The hum deepens. The pulses accelerate. Orbiters detect new chemicals in the upper atmosphere, complex organics, but not of any known type, heavy molecules arranged in repeating structures. They set to not falling to the surface. They set or assembling in the air, forming lattices invisible to the naked eye but visible to spectroscopy. And those lattices are charged. Tiny electrical discharges flicker across them. The atmosphere itself is becoming a circuit that sits when the panic sets in. If Mars is a circuit, what is it connecting to? If Mars is a signal, what is it summoning? If Mars is waking, what is it remembering? No one knows. But everyone knows this. We are no longer spectators at a planetary event. We are spectators at a cosmic relay. And whatever is on the other end of that relay now knows we're watching. October 30th, 20:00 UTC. Something sets changed. We don't need the atmosphere, or the pulse, or the hum. We mean everything. The way the light scatters through Martian clouds, the rhythm in the seismic layer, the low frequencies pulsing through our deep space arrays. It all feels aligned. And then, at 1912 UTC, the skies over Mars fracture. Not physically, not with cracks, but with light. Thin lines stretch across the upper atmosphere. Like filaments under tension, they bend, curve, pull tight, converging toward a single point above Olympus Mons. They don't sit burn. They don't stat flash. They form, and what they form is a shape. Not natural, not random. A perfect circle, outlined in pale, trembling green. Orbiters catch it immediately. Ground stations confirm it. Spectrometers show a local field disruption, not electromagnetic. Space itself is flexing. The area inside the circle appears stable, but the data says otherwise. Something is warping. Mass measurements fluctuate. Gravitational gradients shift. It's like watching an eye blink open. And when it opens, everything goes quiet. Not silence, but hush. No seismic activity. No atmospheric motion. No radio bursts. Just stillness. The circle hangs there, watching. Not a machine, not a vessel. A phenomenon. The AI refuses to classify it. It simply labels the event. Unprecedented. On Earth, people go still. Not from fear, but from recognition. Not conscious. Not logical, but deep. As if some primal part of us knows. Knows this shape. Knows this stillness. Knows what it means. Because now the story isn't set just about Mars. Now the story touches everything. Stars bend behind that circle. Telemetry from nearby orbiters shows lensing effects, as if space around the circle is no longer flat, as if something is pressing through, not into Mars, not into us, through Mars, and the hum returns. But it sets not Mars this time. It's not Atlas. It sets from the circle, and it sets different, slower, deeper, more refined. A signal that sees, a signal that recognizes, a signal that remembers. What does it remember? We don't know, but it sits not looking at Mars. It sits looking through Mars. To us. The final ping arrives at 1948 UTC. Not from the Oort cloud, not from interstellar space. From behind the signal, from somewhere we don't even have coordinates for. And it doesn't echo, it doesn't repeat. It aligns. The hums match, the pulses synchronize, and the circle in the sky expands. Just slightly, just enough to let something through. October 31st, 100 UTC. The eye is still open. It hasn't yet grown larger, just where before it shimmered faintly above Olympus Mons, now it shines, not with brightness, but with presence. No visible object, no beam, no ship, just a point in space. Folded, curved, quiet, an aperture in the fabric of the sky, an opening. And through that opening, something arrives. Not fast, not loud, just there. At first, it looks like light, then like structure, then like memory made visible. Orbiters catch it from 5 angles at once, but each image looks different. One sees geometry, precise, crystalline alignments. Another sees fluidity, motion, swirling and shifting like cloud over water. Another sees heat, vast, ordered energy pulsing in slow waves. Another sees nothing at all. Not blackness, not invisibility, just absence, as if whatever's arriving doesn't exist in our light. And the fifth orbiter loses contact, not due to damage, not due to interference. It simply stops transmitting, as if overwhelmed, as if folded inward. And on Earth, something changes. Not on screens, not in labs, in us. We all feel it, at once, at different times, as if time itself no longer applies in the way it did. People begin to describe the same things, a sound but not with ears, a feeling like warmth behind the sternum, a pressure, not painful, just present, a sensation not of being watched, but of being known. It suts not fear. It stits not awe. It sets recognition, as if something in us has been waiting for this, as if the story written into our DNA finally heard its next line. The event on Mars unfolds slowly, not a landing, not a construction, an emergence. Structures rise, not from the ground, but from beneath perception. Dust folds, clouds bend, reflections sharpen into edges. No announcements, no language, just form. And through it all, the hum continues, now constant, now global, not noise, a tone, one that rises and falls in sync with the planet's new atmosphere, in sync with the light, in sync with us. And on Earth, something else begins. Dreams change. They become shared. Children describe the same places. Artists sketch the same symbols. Musicians begin hearing new chords. And when played, they match. Match the tones from Mars. Match the sequences recorded in the crust. Match the hum from the eye. It's like a key turning in a lock we didn't know we carried. We haven't been contacted. We haven't been invaded. We sit been included. Included in a system larger than our history. Not one of conquest. Not one of domination. One of continuation. Atlas wasn't set to machine. It was a message. A delivery. Of memory. Of chemistry. Of sequence. Not for us, but for the planet. To awaken what it had once been. to resume what had been paused, to remind Mars of itself. And once it remembered, the eye opened. And once the eye opened, the rest began. We don't know what comes next. Will they speak? Will they arrive? Will they teach? Or will they wait? Wait for us to stop asking and start listening. Because we were never alone. Not in the sense of life, but in the sense of story. We thought we were writing our own, but we were already a chapter. And now the next chapter begins. On a planet that was never dead, under a sky that remembers everything, and in the silence between pulses, a new kind of morning begins.